Today, we're heading deep into the heart of Texas, a land of long roads, empty skies, and stories that most people don't talk about once the sun goes down. These are 20 true disturbing stories from Texas travelers. Encounters shared by real people who passed through this state and never forgot what they saw, or what followed them home. From gas stations that seem frozen in time to rest stops that feel like they're watching you. Each of these stories is rooted in reality, and that's what makes them so unsettling. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most people leave without subscribing, and when they do, they miss out on the creepiest, most chilling stories this channel has to offer. Don't make that mistake. Hit the subscribe button now, because tonight is just the beginning, and what's waiting in the darkness isn't going away. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Drop it in the comments, because here at Creepy Vibes, the night never really ends, and the road ahead only gets darker. Let's begin. I was coming back from a job I didn't want to take in the first place, an overnight freight haul that ran late, as they always do, and left me burned out and halfway between irritation and sleep deprivation. I'd made it as far as El Paso, before the fatigue finally hit me like a wall of dry heat. The sun had just dipped behind the mountains, and the sky was this burnt peach color fading into a dusty gray. I pulled off I-10 and found a roadside motel about 6 miles west of town. You know the kind. 2 stories, flat roof, faded pink stucco walls that had bleached out from decades of sun. The neon sign out front was missing a couple letters, so it just said LPM Tel. I didn't care. I just needed a bed and 6 hours of sleep. Nothing more. Inside, the lobby was empty, the air stale like a closed-up freezer. An old woman behind the desk took my ID without looking up. She had a little dog in a sweater that barked when I walked in and didn't stop until I was almost out the door. The key she handed me was an actual metal key, room 108 around the back. I walked outside again, the wind dry and flat like a mouth breathing on you. The night was coming in fast. As I was pulling my overnight bag out of the back of my truck, I noticed someone sitting on the curb near the vending machines. He wasn't smoking, wasn't on his phone, wasn't looking at anything in particular. Just sitting there. He was maybe mid-50s. Bald, pale, wearing a black leather jacket that didn't match the weather. The sleeves were too short, like it was borrowed. His pants were baggy and dusty around the hems, like he'd been walking for a while. He wasn't doing anything, not even watching me. Just sitting there. But there was something off about him. Something I couldn't quite place. I nodded at him as I hoisted my bag over my shoulder. Just a reflex. He didn't respond. Didn't even blink. I walked to my room and shut the door behind me. It clicked with a tired thud. The room was small, but clean in that sterile way that motels sometimes are. The bedspread was navy blue with faded gold patterns. There was a Bible in the drawer and an old CRT television that buzzed faintly even when it was off. I showered, turned on the AC unit. It coughed for a few seconds before settling into a low, mechanical hum and lay down. That should have been the end of it. I woke up around 2:20 a.m., not sure why. No noise, no dream. Just one of those sudden wake-ups where you feel like something tapped you on the shoulder. The room was lit only by the orange glow of the parking lot lights bleeding through the blinds. The AC had stopped. Dead silent now, except for the low pop of cooling metal in the vent. Then I heard the knock. It was soft. Not polite, but not aggressive either. 3 knocks. Then a pause. Then again. I sat up. My heart was already thudding before my brain caught up. I didn't move right away. I just listened. Another set of 3 knocks. Then nothing. I got up slowly and approached the door. Looked through the peephole. No one. But when I moved the curtain aside just enough to peek out the window, I saw him. The man in the black leather jacket was standing directly across the parking lot under the sodium lamp. Same spot I'd seen him earlier. Same posture. Hands in pockets. No bags. No vehicle. He wasn't facing my room exactly. More like he was turned slightly toward the walkway. Like he was just waiting. I watched him for a while. 5 minutes, maybe more. He didn't move once. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. Around 3:15, the knocks came again. Louder this time. Same rhythm. 3 knocks, pause. 3 more. I got up again, looked through the peephole. Again, nothing. But this time when I pulled the curtain aside, he was standing closer, 2 doors down. Still under the light, but now angled slightly toward my room. I didn't open the door. I didn't call the front desk. I just stood there and watched him. At one point, he slowly turned his head and looked directly at my window. I dropped the curtain. When I checked again, less than 10 seconds later, he was gone. I barely slept. For the rest of the night, just dozed in and out with one ear tuned to the hallway dot at 6 a.m., I got up, threw on my clothes, and packed my bag in record time. I half expected to see him still standing out there, but the lot was empty. Not even. A car parked nearby. I walked to the front desk. The woman was there again, sipping from a styrofoam cup and reading a church flyer. I asked her plainly, "Who was the guy hanging around outside last night?" She looked up with this tired expression and said, "Which guy?" "Leather jacket. Bald. Just sitting there by the ice machine." Then he was by my window. Didn't say anything, just knocked and stood around. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Room 108? I nodded out. She looked toward the back door and made this weird face, like she was about to say something and then stopped herself. "People say they see him sometimes. Who is he?" She took a sip of her coffee. Room 108 used to be the caretaker's room. Years ago, before the place sold, he was a quiet man. Lived here for 20 years, maybe more. One night he got fired. Management changed. He didn't take it well. What happened? They found him sitting on the curb by the ice machine. Same as always, just sitting. Didn't go back to his room. Didn't say anything to nobody. Just stayed there all night. She paused. In the morning, he was still there, but he was cold. I felt my stomach drop. She looked at me like she'd told this story a dozen times, and every time, it made her just a little more tired. "You checked into his old room," she said. "Some people say they see him on the first night, not always. Just sometimes." I didn't ask anything else. I just left my key on the counter and walked out. When I got back to my truck, there was something stuck under the wiper blade. A motel. Receipt. Same kind they give you at check-in. But the handwriting was strange, jagged, uneven. It had today's date. Room 108. The signature at the bottom was smeared, but I could make out 2 things. A first name, Henry, and scrawled below it in big shaky letters, "I still work here." I threw it in the passenger seat, drove straight out of El Paso, and never looked back, and I haven't stayed in a motel since. The ice came fast, harder and thicker than anything forecasted. Nobody believed the warning at first. It was just supposed to be a cold front passing through the panhandle. Maybe some sleet, maybe some wind. But by the time Micah and Leslie hit the outskirts of Amarillo on I-40, the road had gone slick as wet glass, and the sky had turned a colorless gray that flattened everything around them. The truck's heater blasted against the cold, seeping in through the seams of the windows, but it couldn't stop the nervous sweat from pooling at the base of Micah's spine as he white-knuckled the wheel and squinted at the almost invisible lanes. Lacey sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket, refreshing her phone over and over, but signal bars had started disappearing a good 20 minutes ago. A thick crust of ice clung to the windshield wipers, making their back-and-forth motion useless, smearing more than clearing. Micah leaned forward as if proximity would help when they saw the truck stop sign, a flickering yellow 24. HR Fuel and Food at the edge of the freeway. It looked like salvation. Nothing else was out there. The land had emptied miles ago, just fields and some power lines running alongside the road, and whatever lay beyond that had been swallowed by the fog of frozen air. He eased the truck down the exit ramp, tires skidding slightly, and pulled into the lot. There were maybe 4 semi-trucks idling in the back lot, coated in frost like dead things. A couple of old sedans huddled near the front entrance. No movement. No music playing from the pumps. No gas smell, which somehow made it worse. They sat in the cab a minute before stepping out. Lacey zipped up her coat and pulled the blanket tighter. Her breath came out in tight little clouds. "This doesn't feel right," she muttered. Micah ignored her, squinting at the front of the truck stop. "We can't drive in that," he said. "We'll wait it out here. Maybe grab some coffee, see if they've got a radio or something." Inside, the place was quiet. Too quiet. Fluorescent lights buzzed, but half were either out or flickering, casting long, uneven shadows across the rows of snacks and souvenir shelves. An unmanned cash register sat under a yellowed nitrogen monoxide check sign. The air smelled like old hot dogs and some kind of cleaner, not fresh, not recent, just lingering. The coffee machines were all empty. One had a stain running down its front like it had been knocked over and never cleaned. They stood there, for a minute, hesitant to go farther in. It wasn't just empty. It felt abandoned, but not long abandoned. There was still warmth, still the faint hum of electricity, still that feeling like someone was watching or had just turned the corner. Out of sight. "Hello?" Micah called out. Nothing. Then Lacey pointed to the far end of the store, behind the counter. A swinging door hung slightly ajar, a sliver of dim hallway behind it. "Maybe they're in the back?" she offered, but her voice trembled. They moved slowly toward the counter. As they passed an old freezer chest labeled fresh bait, something inside rattled. Lacey froze. "It's just the compressor," Micah said, though he sounded less sure than he meant to. Behind the counter, they found the swinging door led to a hallway with a break room at the far end, a pair of restrooms, and a staff only. Door with a padlock looped through the handle, but not locked. Just hanging there. Micah looked at Lacey, then pushed the door open. It led to stairs going down, narrow and metal. The kind of emergency stairs you might see in a hospital basement. The light inside was fluorescent and pinkish, sickly, and didn't reach far. Cold air blew up from below, colder than outside. It smelled like wet cement and something else, something like meat gone bad. "No way," Lacey said, backing up. But Micah stepped in. At the bottom, there was a long corridor, concrete. Floor, exposed pipes above. At the end, another door. They walked toward it, footsteps echoing weirdly in the empty space. The door was steel and windowless. As he reached for the handle, a soft click echoed behind them. They spun. A man stood at the top of the stairs. Thin, tall, wearing a store vest over a long-sleeved thermal. He didn't say anything, just stared. Then he made a slight, sharp motion with one hand, like a warning. "Stay still." Lacey clutched Micah's arm. The man didn't come down. Instead, he backed away slowly. The door swinging shut behind him with a heavy clunk. They were alone again. Micah tried the door. It was unlocked. He opened it. Inside was a large, cold room, brightly lit by overhead LEDs. Concrete floor again, but this time the walls were lined with industrial freezers. Some open, some sealed. And in the middle of the room, 6 or 7, People sat silently on the floor in a circle, dressed in employee uniforms, faces pale and drawn, eyes fixed on a spot just above the doorway. Not at them. Past them. Then, Lacey whispered, "Micah, look up." He followed her gaze. There was something clinging to the ceiling. It looked like a person, but not quite. Too thin, skin pale like paper, eyes entirely black, no eyelids. It was naked but sexless, limbs impossibly long, fingers hooked like claws digging into the tiles overhead. Its head rotated slowly, like it had heard something. It hadn't blinked. The people in the circle didn't move, didn't speak. One of them, a woman with a name tag reading Gina, had blood dried around her ears. Another had a twisted ankle, swollen and purple. Lacey tried to back out, but Micah held her, too afraid to move fast. He reached slowly for the door. A sound filled the room, like a voice but wrong, like a radio tuned to dead air, whispering. Just under the threshold of understanding. It came from the thing on the ceiling. Then the lights flickered. The people on the floor screamed, all at once. Screamed and cried and covered their ears, some slamming their heads into the concrete floor, as if trying to drown out the sound in their own skulls. Micah yanked Lacey through the door, slammed it shut behind them. She was sobbing now, full body shaking. "We have to get out. We have to get out now," she said, but Micah was already pulling her back up the stairs. They burst into the store again. The man from before was gone. Outside, the storm had gotten worse. Ice now coated the truck, the windshield a white blur. The idling trucks in the lot were still there, but no lights on inside. They looked closer this time. No drivers. Not in any of them. Micah ran to the truck stop door and tried it. Locked? But it hadn't been locked when they came in. He threw his weight against it. Nothing. No give. Lacey turned to him. "It doesn't want us to leave." Something banged from under the floor. A thud, then another, rhythmic, coming closer. The creature? A second door on the far wall, near the bathrooms, creaked open. Another worker stepped out slowly, dragging a mop. She looked dead. Not in the literal sense, but her skin was pale and waxy, lips cracked, eyes dull. She didn't blink. Just stared at them and whispered, "Don't speak. Don't move. Don't look at it. Not when it's feeding." Micah opened his mouth to ask what she meant, but she shook her head hard, dropped the mop, and walked past them into the cold, toward the basement. A siren started blaring somewhere outside. Not close, maybe from town, but long and mournful. Then the lights in the store went out. The only illumination now was from the blue-gray glow through the frozen windows, and behind them, from the stairwell, came the sound of claws on metal. Scraping. Ascending. Lacey turned to run, but as she did, Micah saw the shadow stretching out from the hallway, long-limbed, crawling. Too fast. Then everything went still. The truck stop was quiet again. And when the storm cleared 2 days later, a snowplow passed by. The lot. All the trucks were still there, but no one ever found the couple, not even their footprints. It was the kind of heat that made the asphalt shimmer and your skin crawl, not from the temperature alone, but from something deeper, like the land itself was sweating out something it wanted to forget. That stretch of road between Waco and Mejia always felt off to Marlene. She'd driven it dozens of times ever since moving to Dallas 2 years back. Work trips, family visits, long nights of needing to get away. But this time, something about the air pressed on her chest like a warning. She was coming back from her cousin's place in Austin, taking the long way to clear her head after another shouting match with her ex-husband over custody. It was close to sundown, that ugly orange hour when the sun hovered low and mean in the sky, casting everything in long shadows and copper light. Her gas light had come on just outside of Marlin, and by the time she rolled up to the Little Sinclair, station at the edge of Waco, she was running on fumes. It was the kind of station that looked like it had been forgotten by the century. A low, squat building with pale green paint flaking off the stucco and a faded dinosaur sign out front that creaked in the wind. 2 pumps. One worked. The other looked like it hadn't functioned since the Bush administration. Inside, a lone ceiling fan spun lazy circles, and behind the counter sat a man who looked like a bad carving. All angles and sunspots, with eyes that didn't move much. She paid in cash, not wanting to risk her card in a place like that. The guy barely looked up, just slid her the key on a cracked plastic keychain shaped like Texas. "Restrooms around the back," he said. Voice like gravel and engine oil. It was more need than desire. She didn't want to stop, not really. She wanted to be home. In her apartment, with a glass of wine and the sound of her son snoring softly in the next room. But the coffee from earlier had caught up with her, and the stretch of empty road ahead wasn't forgiving. The bathroom was unlit. One of those one-person deals, concrete block walls, tiny window, mirror so warped it looked like it belonged in a funhouse. When she locked the door behind her, the hum of the single fluorescent bulb overhead buzzed like a hornet. And then, just as she unzipped her jeans and sat down, she heard it. A baby crying. Faint, muffled, but unmistakable. It echoed softly from the ceiling vent, high up, rust-ringed, like it hadn't been cleaned in decades. The kind of noise that instantly sets a parent's nerves on edge. Not a tantrum, not a scream. Just soft, pitiful sobs. Like someone too tired to wail properly. Marlene froze. Every instinct in her body jolted awake. For a second, she thought it was coming from outside. But no, it was definitely up in the vent. Not just crying either. She could hear breathing. Whispers, maybe? Like someone trying to soothe it. She stood and strained to listen. Her heart beat loud in her ears, making it hard to be sure. Then she knocked on the vent casing gently. The crying stopped. She waited. Silence. No wind. No insects. Just the flickering buzz of the overhead light. She rushed out faster than she meant to, still trying to make sense of it. The gravel crunched under her boots as she marched back to the station. "Hey," she called, stepping back inside. The clerk looked up from a greasy paperback without lifting his head fully. "You got someone in there? In the bathroom?" "I heard a baby." The man stared at her for a long second, then blinked. "No, ma'am. Ain't no one in there but you." Marlene frowned. "I'm telling you, I heard a baby crying through the vent. You sure no one's upstairs or wherever that thing goes?" He set his book down slow. Stood up. "We don't got no upstairs," he said flatly. "Never did." She looked out the window. The building was low and squat, but she could have sworn there was a utility room, maybe a crawl space up top. Still, something in his tone shut. "Her up. You all right?" he asked, his voice slower now, softer. But not concerned, more like a warning. She mumbled something about lack of sleep and turned to go. Didn't want to be there a second longer. Back in the car, she sat with the engine running, hands gripping the wheel. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an audio illusion. A weird plumbing noise. Maybe a cat got stuck up there. It wasn't until she reached over to shift into drive that she noticed something that made her blood turn cold. The baby monitor light was blinking. She hadn't touched that thing in weeks. It was the kind with an audio receiver and a little cephal red light bar that lit up when sound was detected. She kept it in the glove box mostly. Ever since Dylan had started sleeping through the night. It shouldn't have been on, but it was. Not only on, but lit, blinking steady, faintly. She picked it up with trembling hands and brought it to her ear. Nothing. Static. Then, underneath, That same sound, crying, soft, muffled, but identical. Exactly the same tone. The same rhythm. Her heart jackhammered. She flung the monitor across the passenger seat and peeled out of the lot, kicking up gravel. Didn't look back. Didn't stop driving until the lights of Dallas blurred in the windshield and her hands had cramped from squeezing the wheel. That night, after she tucked Dylan in and triple-checked the locks, she dug the monitor back out. It was off. Cold too. The touch. Batteries removed, but when she tried to sleep, she couldn't. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a sob. Every gust of wind like a whisper. The next morning, curiosity got the better of her. She looked up the Sinclair station online. No reviews. No address on Google Maps. The satellite view showed an empty patch of land just off Highway 84, near the county line. Confused, she drove back the next day. Daylight this time. Bright sun overhead, clouds scattered. She found the turnoff, but there was no gas station. Just a dirt lot, fenced off with chain link and a sun-bleached sign that read, Property Condemned County Order Number 9387 AB. It looked like whatever had been there was long gone. Concrete foundation cracked, pump stripped, the lot half swallowed by weeds and time. No sign of the building. Just a rusted pole where the dinosaur sign might have hung. She got out, stood. In the silence, tried to line it up with her memory. But it was all wrong. Like the place had been scrubbed out. She turned to leave, and that's when she heard it again. Not from a vent. Not from a speaker. From behind her. In the wind, that soft, pitiful sound, a baby crying. It had been raining since before dawn, and the sky hadn't lightened once all morning. The kind of rain that doesn't lash or thunder but just falls, endless and gray, like the clouds are wringing themselves out in silence. Driving east on Highway 71 between Austin and Bastrop, the tires of my old Chevy hissed along the wet pavement, windshield wipers scraping rhythmically, hypnotically, like a slow heartbeat. I was coming off a night shift in South Austin, working security at a self-storage. Lot easy money, just a lonely post and a rotating chair. I hadn't slept in 24 hours, and the coffee in my thermos had gone cold sometime around 3 a.m. still. I was awake enough to notice something wasn't quite right up ahead. There was a figure walking along the side of the road. I saw him through the blur of the windshield, just past where the shoulder narrowed, maybe half a mile from where the Bastrop city limit sign would be. No cars around. The guy was soaked to the bone, shoulders hunched, arms limp at his sides. He wasn't thumbing for a ride, wasn't waving, just walking. Like he had no idea where he was or what he was doing. At first I passed him by. I mean, you don't pick up hitchhikers these days. Not between cities, not when they're alone and barefoot on a 2-lane stretch in the middle of nowhere. That part really struck me. He was barefoot. His jeans were clinging to his legs, and his shirt, some long-sleeved flannel thing, was hanging open. No pack, no umbrella, no phone, nothing. Just that steady shuffle forward. I made it another quarter mile before something twisted in my gut. Not guilt, exactly. More like curiosity. Something about the way he walked, like he wasn't moving through the world so much as being dragged through it, stuck with me. I slowed down, checked the mirror. Still no other cars. I pulled onto the shoulder, reversed until I was beside him. Rolled the window down halfway. Need a ride? He stopped without turning. Didn't look startled. Didn't even glance up at first. Just stood there in the rain, his head bowed, like the question hadn't reached him yet. Then slowly, he tilted his face toward me. The water had flattened. His hair, which clung to his forehead in strings. His skin was pale, like the color had been washed out of it. When he looked at me, I felt something cold settle in my stomach, like a chunk of ice dropped down my spine. But I didn't drive off. I should have. I didn't. Yeah, he said, voice rough and low. Thanks. He opened the passenger door and climbed in. The interior of the truck filled immediately with the smell of wet earth and something else metallic, like copper and rain-soaked rust. I tried not to look directly at him, just eased the truck back onto the road. Where you headed? I asked after a minute. He didn't answer right away. I glanced over and saw him staring straight ahead, water dripping from his clothes, pooling on the rubber mat beneath him. Cemetery, he said finally. Which one? He blinked slowly. Fairview, just past Bastrop. I knew the one. Anne. Old plot tucked off a county road, surrounded by pine and brush. I'd seen it once, driving back roads to avoid traffic. No one ever went out there unless they had business. The place didn't even have a real parking lot, just a dirt pull-off. That turned to muck when it rained. You have family out there? I asked. The hitcher didn't reply. We drove in silence for a while. The rain beat steady on the roof, and my wipers started to smear instead of clear. I fiddled with the dial, tried to focus on the road, but I couldn't stop glancing sideways. The man was shivering now, teeth clenched tight, his hands tucked under his arms. One of his feet was bleeding. I could see a smear of red across the mat, like he'd stepped on something sharp out there in the brush. Still, he didn't complain. Just sat there, like he was waiting for something. You sure you're all right? I asked. I could drop. You at a gas station, maybe get you a towel or something warm to... No. His voice was firmer now. Just the cemetery. I nodded and didn't say anything else. By the time we reached the outskirts of Bastrop, the rain had let up slightly. A mist more than a downpour. I turned onto the county road, the trees crowding in close, dripping with moisture. The truck's tires squelched as I pulled off near the cemetery entrance. The gate was open old iron with one hinge half broken, and the grass beyond it was overgrown. No other cars, no sign of fresh footprints. Just that strange quiet you get in graveyards when the sky is about to break open again. Turned to tell him we were there. The seat was empty. At first, I thought he'd ducked down to grab something, or maybe he'd opened the door without me noticing. But the door was still locked, the handle unmoved. The passenger seat was soaked through, sure, but it was empty. No sign of the man, no sound of footsteps outside, no motion in the mirror. Just gone. I opened the door, stepped out, and looked around. The only sound was the ticking of the engine and the faint hiss of water dripping from the trees. I walked toward the cemetery gate and scanned the grounds, hoping to see him walking between the stones. Nothing. I even called out. Just once. No answer. That was 2 weeks ago. I told myself I'd imagined it. Lack of sleep. Long night. Maybe I'd nodded off behind the wheel and dreamed it. But then I noticed the blood stain. It was still on the passenger side floor mat, dried to a dark rust. I tried scrubbing it out. Nothing worked. And the smell, the wet, coppery scent still lingers whenever it rains. Then came the dreams. Every night since, I've seen him. Standing at the side of the highway, barefoot, soaked, his face turned just slightly toward me, never speaking, never moving, just watching. And each night, he's a little closer, a little clearer. Last night, I saw the cemetery behind him. Fairview, the stones cracked and sinking. And there was a grave at his feet. Fresh soil, no grass yet. The name carved in the marker had been smeared, like someone had run wet fingers across it. But I saw mine. Tomorrow I'm going back. I need to see it again in daylight. Maybe it'll make sense then. Maybe it won't. But something tells me I didn't pick him up at all. I think he picked me. It was a little past 7 p.m. when Garrett Reese first noticed the glitch, or what he thought was a glitch. He'd left Lubbock earlier that afternoon after checking in on his mother at the assisted living place. She barely remembered who he was these days, and the nurses had called him in because she'd tried to walk out barefoot into the parking lot, claiming she was late for school. It was happening more often now, little breaks from reality that were becoming less little and more permanent. Garrett left feeling raw, like a peeled onion, and just wanted to get back to his place in Austin before it got dark. He punched the route into his GPS and followed it without thinking. It was the same road he'd taken dozens of times before US 84. South to Abilene, then merge onto I-20. Simple, straight shot. Wide open. Nothing but dry land, barbed wire fences, and sky so wide it made him feel like he could fall into it. But somewhere around Sweetwater, he noticed the GPS recalculating. No explanation. Just a quick spin of the wheel on the screen and then a new route blinking into existence. He glanced down. Instead of merging onto I-20 East, it was directing him to take an exit that led nowhere. He recognized M608. He thought maybe it was traffic ahead. An accident maybe. GPS reroutes for that kind of thing. He followed it. It didn't feel wrong. Not yet. He ended up back on I-20 a few minutes later, the detour barely noticeable in time, but something about it stuck in his gut. He chalked it up to stress. His mind wasn't exactly firing on all cylinders lately. Ever since the divorce, it felt like he was operating at 80% most days. The road stretched on, golden hour fading into dusk. Traffic was light, just a few 18-wheelers, and the occasional sedan buzzing by in the opposite direction. His headlights cast long shadows on the asphalt. Then the GPS chimed again, rerouting. He looked down. What the hell? Again, it was leading him off the interstate, back onto the same side road, back around through the loop that spit him out near the same stretch of highway. It didn't make sense. Goddamn thing, he muttered, tapping the screen. He tried to manually force the route back onto the interstate, but each time he zoomed out and tried to adjust it, the app flickered and recalibrated, always back to that same pattern. A loop. The third time he took the detour, he noticed her. She was standing by the barbed wire fence just past mile marker 281 on the north side of the highway. Blonde hair down to her shoulders, hands at her sides, face pale and unreadable in the fading light. She wasn't trying to flag him down, wasn't waving, wasn't crying or walking or panicking. She just stood there, looking across the lanes of traffic. Looking at him. He drove past too fast to get a good look. In the mirror, she was just a silhouette, but something about her posture made his chest tighten. Too still, like a photograph come to life. He shook it off. There were weirdos all over the place. Hitchhikers, drug addicts, ghost hunters. Hell, that stretch of Texas highway was filled with little towns that barely showed up on a map. He told himself not to think about it. Don't start making it something it wasn't. But the next time the GPS rerouted him, and it did, within 10 minutes, he told himself he was done with it. He turned off the volume and decided he'd trust his own memory to get him home. Only. Somehow, he missed the merge again. It happened without him realizing. He was driving, lost in thought, thinking about his mom. And then suddenly there was the sign, mile marker 281. And there she was again. Same position, same clothes. This time, though, her head turned as he passed. Slow, mechanical, like it took effort. Garrett's stomach dropped. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, glanced at the GPS, which was now completely black, just a blank screen with the company logo flickering faintly like a dying firefly. The app had frozen. Nope, he said, voice dry. No, we're not doing this. He took the next exit and pulled into a gas station in Baird. It was one of those dusty, half-abandoned stations with a single, flickering light above the pumps, and a bathroom that required a key tied to a chunk of wood. He asked the clerk, some teenage kid with acne and a tired expression, if there was anything weird going on with the roads. Weird? The kid repeated. Yeah, like construction or something. I keep getting routed back to the same place. The kid looked at him, then at the bug-splattered windshield. You seen her? Garrett blinked. Who? Lady by the fence. People talk about her sometimes. Think she's some kind of ghost. I don't believe in ghosts, Garrett said automatically. Yeah, most folks don't, but they still end up seeing her. Garrett left without saying anything else. Back on the road, he tried taking a completely different route, turned south. On US 277, tried to loop down toward San Angelo. He figured if he could get far enough off course, maybe the glitch would reset, or the GPS would recalibrate properly once he was back in an area with better reception. But no matter where he turned, every time he reached a highway junction or a crossroads, the signs were the same. 1 to 20 East, Abilene, mile marker 281, as if the world had folded in on itself, shrunk to a single point. When he passed her again, the fifth time now, he didn't slow down, didn't look directly. But he could feel it, the way you can feel someone, staring at the back of your head. That time, she was closer to the road. Garrett's hands were shaking. He turned the radio on just to fill the air, but all he got was static, no matter what station he tried. Just hissing noise and something that sounded faintly like breathing. He pulled over, got out, looked around. The night air was heavy with the smell of dry grass and diesel fumes. The stars above were blindingly bright. Everything felt off, like he was walking through a dream that had started out normal and taken a wrong turn into nightmare territory. He checked his phone. No bars. Not even one, and the GPS app? Gone. Vanished from his home screen entirely. He sat there in the driver's seat for a long time, engine idling, until a pair of headlights approached from the west. A black truck, windows tinted. It passed slowly, and Garrett tried to wave it down, but the driver didn't stop. Didn't even look at him. The woman wasn't by the fence anymore. He didn't see her again until the seventh loop. This time, she was in the road, standing directly on the white line in the center, hands down, eyes forward. There was no time to stop. Garrett swerved hard to avoid her, the tires shrieking on the pavement. He felt the car fishtail, dirt and gravel spraying as he landed in the shoulder. He looked back. Nothing. No woman. No body. No blood. Just silence. His breath came fast. Shallow. He could feel his heart beating in his throat. He climbed out, yelling, "Where the hell are you?" No answer. He checked the spot where she'd been. There wasn't even a footprint. He didn't sleep that night. Just drove in endless circles, each one bringing him back to that same cursed stretch of road. Mile marker 281. He stopped counting. After 11. The sun came up and went back down, and at some point he realized he was out of gas. That the food wrappers in his passenger seat had piled up. That his face in the mirror looked thinner, grayer, like he hadn't slept in days, but the loop kept going. Each pass, she was closer. Sometimes on the shoulder, sometimes in the grass. Once, she was sitting on the guardrail, swinging her legs like a child. Eventually, Garrett stopped driving. He got out, walked to the fence, stared across the highway at her. "Who are you?" He whispered. Her lips moved, just slightly, but the words didn't reach him. He climbed the fence. That was the last time anyone saw Garrett Reese. His car was found abandoned near mile marker 281, engine cold, windshield cracked. Phone missing. No blood. No signs of struggle. No prints. In the dirt, except his own. Some say the road takes people. Sometimes. Some say she's looking for someone. A ride, maybe. A witness. Maybe she doesn't even know anymore. But they do say this. If you see the woman by the fence near mile marker 281, don't stop. Don't reroute. Don't look back. Drive on. Keep your eyes forward. And whatever you do, don't listen when she whispers your name. The highway out of San Angelo stretched black and empty under a heavy July sky, a fat moon hanging low behind a curtain of heat shimmer. Jason Thorne had been driving for hours with only talk radio and the occasional static-cracked country song to keep him company. His AC had gone out 2 days earlier, and with the windows down, the wind came in hot and dry, bringing with it the smell of dust, asphalt, and the fading scent of old mesquite trees. He'd left Austin late, stupidly thinking he could make it all the way to El Paso in one go. But by 11:43 p.m., he was running low on gas, bleary-eyed, and starting to see shapes on the side of the road that weren't really there. When he spotted the green, rest area 1 mile sign glowing in his high beams, it felt like salvation. He didn't remember ever stopping at this one before, though he'd taken this stretch of Route 67 100 times or more, visiting clients out west, burying himself in Texas-sized contracts and oilfield logistics. The rest area came up on the left, a small semicircle off the highway surrounded by low scrub and dead grass. One single building stood under humming sodium lights, faded white brick with a flat roof and 2 vending machines out front. He pulled in, gravel crunching beneath his tires, and parked right near the entrance. There were no other cars, not one. The place was still, like it had been forgotten. No insects buzzed. No coyotes howled in the distance. Just a dead kind of silence that pressed against the ears. Jason got out, stretching his legs. He squinted at the structure. No lights inside, but the dull flicker from the vending machines offered just enough to see by. He tried the men's restroom door. Locked. He tried the women's. Same thing. Then he moved to the small lobby door between them, also locked. He cupped his hands and looked through the glass, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. It looked abandoned. Well, shit, he muttered, stepping back. Maybe it was one of those rest stops that shut down overnight, even though he'd never heard of such a thing. Either way, he needed to piss, and maybe stretch out on a bench for a few minutes. He thought about just going behind the building, but something about the place made him feel like he was being watched. Not paranoia exactly, more like a quiet sense of unease, like he was trespassing on something old and territorial. Still, he walked around the side, past the humming vending machines, past the blank, glassless windows that looked like they'd been painted over. He was just about to unzip when he heard the click, a soft mechanical click. Behind him, Jason turned slowly. The door to the lobby had opened. Not all the way, just a crack, but enough for pale light to spill out onto the concrete. He stared at it, his bladder forgotten. There'd been no sound of movement, no footsteps, no creak of hinges. Just that little click. And now the door hung open, waiting. Hello? He called, trying to sound casual. Didn't think anyone was here. No response. Just more silence, heavier now. He stepped closer to the door. Something moved inside, a shadow. Not a person exactly, more like the absence of one. It was tall, lean, and wrong. Jason's stomach nodded. Then it stepped into view. It was a man, or maybe it was supposed to be one. He wore a faded, gray button-up shirt tucked into black work pants. His limbs were too long, his hands hanging just a fan. Little too low, fingers curled like broken twigs. But it was the head that made Jason freeze. There was no face, just smooth. Pale skin where features should have been, stretched taut like wax. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, nothing. Jason took a step back, heart hammering. Jesus Christ. The faceless thing tilted its head almost like it was curious. Then it reached out with one impossibly long arm and pushed the door open wider. Jason turned and ran. He bolted around the building, feet skidding on gravel, and threw himself into his car. Locked the doors, fumbled for the keys. He didn't care about rest or gas or anything anymore. Just needed to leave, but the engine wouldn't turn over. He twisted the key again. The dashboard lights flickered. Nothing. Come on. He looked up. The rest area was gone. Not the building, the entire lot. The semicircle drive, the vending machines, the benches, even the light posts, all gone. Just flat, empty fields stretched out in every direction, the highway swallowed by black. He was no longer where he'd been seconds ago. Jason's breath caught in his throat. He opened the car door and stepped out, turning in a slow circle. No wind, no sound. The only thing left was the building, now alone in a sea of dry dirt and cracked earth. The faceless man stood in front of it. Unmoving. Jason backed away, feeling like he was walking underwater. Every step was harder than the last. He turned and tried to run, but his legs weren't working right. The landscape was too quiet, like the world had lost its voice. Then he heard it, a low, scraping sound behind him. He didn't want to look. But he did. The faceless man was crawling now, dragging itself across the ground on all fours. Its back arched too high, its limbs bending at wrong angles. And it was fast. Jason screamed. He turned and ran. There was no direction anymore, no highway. No signs, just emptiness. He didn't know how long he ran. Minutes? Hours? The sky never changed. No stars, no moon. Just a black sheet above him. Eventually, he collapsed. His knees gave out. He hit the ground and lay there, dry earth pressing into his face. His throat ached from screaming. His heart hammered like it was trying to punch through his ribs. When he opened his eyes again, he was back, lying on the concrete in front of the rest stop. His car was there, the vending machines, the lights, the road, everything. The building was closed again. No door ajar. No sign of anything strange. It was morning now. Sunlight filtered through the clouds, hazy and yellow. Jason stood, shaking. He checked his phone. It was 6:03 a.m. He had lost nearly 7 hours. His legs were sore. His clothes were dusted with dirt. The car started on the first try. He drove without stopping, all the way to El Paso. Never even looked at another rest stop. He didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe him? But the next time he drove back through San Angelo, he paid attention. Looked for that rest area. It wasn't there. No sign. No turnoff. Nothing but flat land. And at night, sometimes, he dreams of that place again. The silence. The slow crawl. The faceless man. But worse, each time it gets a little closer. They'd left Terlingua too late. Connor wanted to catch the sunset from the Chizos Mountains and pushed it, ignoring Ava's concern about the road back to their rental outside of Marathon. It wasn't just the miles Big Bend country didn't play by the rules. Distances lied, roads twisted longer than maps claimed, and once the sun dropped behind the crags, darkness came fast and full, like spilled ink across the desert. They'd taken the southern loop through the park, a long, lonesome road that cut through stretches of scrub and shadow, empty as a forgotten photograph. No cars behind them, no lights ahead. Just them and the vast, dark weight of the desert. Connor's Tacoma bumped along the cracked pavement, the headlights casting thin, pale cones ahead, swallowing bugs and picking out the edges of mesquite and creosote. Ava had the map on her phone, but sometime after they passed the Ross Maxwell Scenic Drive junction, the signal dropped. No bars, no GPS, no nothing. Still dead? Connor asked. Yeah, Ava said, frowning at the screen. You sure we're on the right road? There's only one road out here. It'll spit us back near Alpine. Worst case, we loop back and sleep in the truck. Great, she muttered, glancing at the empty sky. No signal, no lights, just a couple of dumbasses on the edge of the goddamn earth. They drove on. 10 miles, maybe more. The silence settled like dust, thick and dry, broken only by the occasional hiss of the tires over gravel. The desert around them was a black ocean, broken by outcroppings of jagged rock, like shipwrecks. The stars above were sharp and bright, but felt impossibly far away. Then, headlights, a pair of them, distant, coming over a low rise up ahead. Connor straightened in his seat. Finally. Another car, but Ava's face didn't relax. Where the hell would someone be coming from out here? The lights grew closer, two white eyes blinking into the dark. But just as Connor eased his foot off the gas and started to lift his hand to flash his brights in greeting, the lights vanished. Not faded. Not dimmed, vanished, like a switch flipped. What the hell? He muttered, squinting. Ava sat forward. Did they turn off? Maybe pulled off the road? There's nowhere to pull off. They drove another few minutes. No sign of a car, no taillights, no tire tracks. The desert swallowed everything. Connor was quiet, but his grip on the wheel had gone tight. Ava didn't say anything either, just kept glancing over her shoulder like she expected something to be there. Another mile. Another set of headlights appeared, this time behind them. Connor glanced in the mirror. Look. Ava turned. Where'd they come from? No one's passed us. Maybe they came off a side road. There are no side roads. The lights grew brighter, closer. The hum of the engine suddenly sounded too loud, too isolated. Connor checked the speedometer. 55. The lights stayed. Behind them, matching their pace. Then they blinked out. Just gone. Connor slowed the truck and glanced in the mirror again. Nothing. No one. This is messed up, Ava said. Her voice had gone tight, brittle. They pulled over, killed the engine, sat in silence with the windows down. The desert smelled dry and metallic, like old blood on rust. Somewhere, a coyote barked once, then fell silent. No lights. No sound of an approaching engine. Just wind sliding over the hood like a ghost's hand. Connor turned the key. Nothing happened. Don't, Ava said. Don't mess around. I'm not, he said, trying again. The engine whined but didn't catch. Again, a dry sputter, then silence. They sat in the cab, the cold settling in. Ava stared straight ahead. I don't think we're supposed to be here, she said, voice small. This stretch of road, it doesn't want us here. Connor didn't laugh, didn't argue. Just looked out at the nothing all around them and felt the weight of it settle in. Then came the third set of headlights, this time from the side. There was no road there, just open desert, but the lights appeared anyway wide apart, tall, like a truck or an RV, and moved silently across the brush. No dust kicked up, no sound. Just two beams floating impossibly forward until they were almost parallel with the Tacoma. Connor grabbed the door handle. Ava caught his arm. Don't. I'm not just going to sit here. What if it's not a car? He looked at her, saw the reflection of those lights swimming in her wide eyes. Then back out the window. Lights blinked off. A low mechanical groan echoed across the plain. Not a vehicle. Not something living. Something in between, grinding from some unseen place like the gears of a machine made from bone and sand. Connor hit the key again. This time the engine turned over. The dash lit up like it was waking from a long sleep. He didn't wait. Slammed. It into drive and peeled out, gravel pinging off the undercarriage. They drove faster now. The road didn't look right. It twisted when it shouldn't, dipped into strange angles. Once, they passed a dead javelina that looked too fresh, its eyes wide and wet even though there was no blood, no wound. Just dead. Ava whispered something. Connor didn't catch it. What? Don't look at the lights, she said, staring. Straight ahead. That's how they find you. He wanted to ask what she meant, but then they crested another rise and saw them again, dozens of them, lining both sides of the road, stretching off into the desert. White and red, blinking and shifting like fireflies on meth. None attached to vehicles. None moving. Just lights. Waiting. Connor didn't slow. He focused on the road. The truck vibrated like it was fighting something. Like something deep under the road didn't want them to pass. Then came the fog. Not a normal mist, but a thick, unnatural wall that rose from the ground like smoke from a pyre. The headlights bounced off it and came back wrong, bent and broken into strange shapes. Ava clutched the dash. Don't stop. Just go. I can't see. Doesn't matter. Drive. They passed through the fog and came out into silence. No road behind them. No road ahead. The Tacoma idled on a flat stretch of white dust that looked nothing like the highway. The mountains were gone. The stars overhead were wrong, more of them, brighter, but somehow twisted, unfamiliar. Connor killed. The engine. The silence was total. Then the lights returned. All around them, no beams. Just floating orbs, dozens, hundreds, suspended in the air like eyes. And in the center of them, something moved, not walked. Moved. A shape taller than the Tacoma, wrong in proportion, limbs too long, head cocked at a strange twitching angle. Its skin shimmered, not reflecting light, but swallowing it, absorbing. Ava's breath hitched. Connor. The thing stopped 10 feet from the front bumper. Its head tilted again, studying them. Then the Tacoma went black. No power. No lights. No hum. The desert returned, but it wasn't the same desert. The ground throbbed, faintly pulsing with red. Veins of something beneath the dust, and they weren't alone anymore. Figures emerged from the dark. Not the creature. Others, people-shaped but translucent. Pale echoes, dozens of them, standing just beyond the reach of the dead headlights. Ava's voice trembled. They're the ones who didn't leave. Connor looked at her. She was crying. Reached for her hand and it passed through. Not all the way. Just enough. He looked down. His own hand flickered, translucent at the edges. The lights didn't want you to look because they didn't want to be seen. They wanted you to follow. To disappear. No one ever passes that stretch of road after dark, because once you do, you're not coming back. You just become one of the lights. It was the last stretch of Highway 380, just outside Denton, Texas, where the landscape starts to flatten into a dustier version of itself. The sun was sliding off the edge of the horizon like something heavy giving up, and the air had that itchy, humid drag that made you feel like you were wearing the day's heat on your skin. Aaron Dole hadn't planned on stopping. He was only halfway through a cross-Texas run from Amarillo to Tyler, where a temporary job in a warehouse was waiting. Not glamorous work, but steady. And after the mess he'd left behind in Amarillo, a car with a cracked head gasket, a landlord who'd changed the locks without notice, and an ex who still threw his mail in the trash. Steady sounded like salvation. He spotted the Dust Haven Motel on the south side of Denton just after dark. A squat, L-shaped building with a neon sign that buzzed louder than the insects in the mesquites. The sis flickered in and out like it was trying to tell him something. D_Ut Haven. Dust Haven, sure. But a Duds Haven, too. The parking lot was half empty. and the windows looked yellow from the inside like someone had been smoking near the drapes since 1974. Aaron told himself it would be one night, just to get some sleep before the last leg of the trip. The woman at the front desk was pale and bird-like, her eyes too big for her face and wet-looking, like she'd been crying or had just come in from the cold. She slid him the registration form with a cracked fingernail and didn't speak a word. The lobby smelled like mildew and boiled eggs. Room 110, first floor, near the end of the building. She gave him a key card in one of those cheap cardboard sleeves with the Wi-Fi code written in blue ink, Dusty West. He thanked her. She didn't look up, just kept staring at the wall behind him, like there was something back there that only she could see. Aaron dragged his duffel to the room. The hallway lights buzzed like gnats. The walls were that institutional beige that always looked dirty, no matter how clean they were. The carpet felt damp under his boots. He got to room 110, slipped the keycard into the lock, and heard the soft click of it disengaging. He pushed the door open. At first, he thought the room was empty. It was dim, the way motel rooms always are, 2 weak bulbs on the nightstands, and one overhead that hummed but didn't seem to actually illuminate anything. The place smelled like mildew and microwave dinners, and the AC unit rattled in the wall like it had something stuck inside it. Then he saw the man. He was sitting on the bed, the far one, near the window, sitting bolt upright, back straight, feet flat on the floor, wearing a denim jacket and work boots, hands resting on his thighs. He was staring at the wall. Not the TV, not the window, the wall. His head was tilted slightly, like he was listening for something inside it. Aaron froze. Man didn't move, didn't look up, didn't speak. Sorry, Aaron said. I think they double-booked the room. No response. Aaron stepped back into the hall, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. He stood there a second, uncertain, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Maybe the front desk lady gave him the wrong card. Maybe she was out of it. Or maybe the guy in there was squatting. Meth heads? Homeless. Denton had a few. He headed back to the front desk. The woman was still, sitting there in the exact same position, like she hadn't breathed since he left. He explained the situation. Someone in his room, already inside, sitting on the bed like he belonged there. She didn't blink. You said room 110? She asked in a whisper. Yeah. She looked down at something behind the desk. Then slowly, deliberately, pulled out a second key card. She held it up. This one's for room 110. That one you have, I didn't give that to you. Aaron frowned and dug in his pocket. Pulled out the key card she'd handed him. Same cardboard sleeve. Same Wi-Fi code. She held her card next to his. Identical, but hers was warm. His felt cold somehow. Almost damp. Do you want a different room? She asked. He looked at her. Her face was blank, neutral, but her fingers were gripping the edge of the counter too tightly. Her knuckles were white. No, he said, surprising himself. I just want to figure out who the hell that is. She didn't answer. He took both cards and went back. Room 110 still had that dull yellow glow spilling from under the door. Aaron hesitated, then used her card this time. The lock clicked again. He pushed it open. The man was still there, still, staring at the wall. Same pose, same clothes. Like he hadn't moved at all. Aaron stepped in this time, heart thumping. Hey, he said, you all right? Nothing. He walked over slowly, stepping around the edge of the other bed. Buddy, you in the wrong room or what? Then he saw what the man was holding. Another key card. Same cardboard sleeve. Same Wi-Fi code. Identical to the one Aaron still had in his pocket. The man's hands were wrapped tightly around it, gripping. It's so hard the skin on his knuckles looked bruised. Aaron's voice dropped to a whisper. Where'd you get that?" The man didn't look at him, but his mouth moved, just slightly, whispering something. Aaron leaned closer. "Can't leave," the man said. His voice was dry and broken, like a radio tuned to a dead channel. "Can't leave till someone else takes it." "What?" The man finally turned his head. Slowly. His face was waxy and pale, like he hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. His eyes were bloodshot and full of something that didn't look quite like life. He looked at Aaron, and for a split second, Aaron saw something reflected in the man's pupils, something long and dark and moving inside the wall. Then the man dropped the keycard on the bed and disappeared. Not in a puff of smoke. Not with any drama, just gone. Like someone had blinked and erased him from the room. The keycard was still there. Sitting on the comforter, Aaron backed out of the room so fast he tripped over his own boots. He slammed the door and stood in the hallway, shaking, holding the warm keycard in one hand, the cold one in the other. Back at the front desk, the woman was gone. Gone. No note. No sound. Her chair sat empty, slowly spinning, like she'd just stepped out a moment ago. The door to the office behind her was open, and the lights inside were off. Aaron didn't call out. Something told him not to. He got in his car. Started. The engine. The dashboard lights flickered once, then went dead. Car wouldn't start. The headlights pulsed, dim, then dark, then bright again. Like a heartbeat, he looked down. The cold keycard was gone from his pocket. The warm one, the one she'd given him, was in the cup holder, and on the passenger seat, another keycard. Same cardboard sleeve. Same handwriting. He hadn't put it there. Aaron looked up. Room 110's curtain twitched. Just barely. He didn't sleep that night. Didn't leave either. He tried calling for a tow truck. No signal. Tried walking to the gas station a mile down the road. Every time he rounded the corner, he found himself back at the motel parking lot. Like the place had folded around him. And now the front desk is locked. The power's going in and out. There's a second toothbrush in the bathroom he didn't bring. A pair of boots by the bed that aren't his. And when he turns on the TV, it only plays static, except sometimes just for a second. He sees himself sitting on the far bed, staring at the wall. He still has the key, still waiting for someone to take a so he can leave. She pulled off the highway just past dusk, somewhere along the flat, wind-bitten edge of Lubbock, Texas, where the sky had that long, burnt orange stretch of horizon that made everything feel wide open and godless. Emily Danvers hadn't planned. To stop there just needed gas, a quick bite, maybe a moment to stretch her back. The drive from Albuquerque to Dallas was long and tedious, and her eyelids were already starting to sag with that familiar road-weary buzz behind her eyes. There was a diner, squat and square, with a flickering neon sign that simply read food. She didn't even bother with the name. She pulled into the gravel lot and let the engine idle for a second longer than necessary, staring out into the dusty evening as if waiting for something to convince her not to go in. Inside, it was half-lit, yellow and dim and tired, like the place had been slowly decomposing since the early 80s. A couple of truckers hunched over their coffee like penitents. The woman behind the counter had a smoker's cough and a black apron dusted with powdered sugar. The bell on the door jingled half-heartedly when Emily stepped inside. She picked the booth farthest from the window and slid into the cracked vinyl seat, her reflection in the greasy window looking as bleary as she felt. She just started glancing at the plastic menu when she heard it, Emily Danvers. She didn't look up right away. Her first thought was that she must have dropped something, maybe her driver's license or credit card. But she hadn't paid yet, hadn't even spoken to the waitress. The voice wasn't familiar. Male, low, with a flat Texan edge. Not friendly, Exactly. Not threatening either. Just sure of itself, Emily Danvers, the voice repeated. She raised her eyes slowly, cautious like an animal in a blind. The man was tall, lean, dressed in an old denim jacket and black jeans, with dusty boots that looked like they'd been walking Lubbock's back roads since the Eisenhower administration. He had a face like a half-collapsed barn rugged, long. Lines, pale blue eyes sunk deep in weathered skin. Not young. Not ancient either, just ageless in the way some men are when they've been carved out by sun and solitude. "Do I know you?" Emily asked. "No," he said, "but I know you." She stared at him for a second too long, her stomach starting to coil. "Well, you've got the wrong person. I'm not from around here." I know that too. There was something wrong with the way he said it. It wasn't a flirty come-on or a creepy coincidence. It was a fact, cold and unavoidable, like he was reading it from a file. She forced a smile and glanced toward the waitress, but she'd gone into the back, maybe to smoke or die. The truckers didn't look up. It was like no one else in the diner had even heard him speak. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else," she said carefully. "No," he said again. "I'm not mistaken. You've never been to Lubbock. You've never been east of Amarillo. You always drive at night. You don't like mirrors. Your middle name is Lee. Your mother died in October. Your favorite color is green. You used to have a scar on your shoulder, but it's gone now." Her mouth had gone dry. "Who the hell are you?" He slid into the booth across from her, hands folded like a priest. "I'm the one they sent to find you." Emily blinked. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer, just looked at her with those washed-out eyes. There was something in them, some distant, unknowable sadness, but also a glint of recognition, like he was watching a memory play out in real time. "I need to go," she said, her voice hollow. "Where?" he asked. "Back to the road? You'll end up here again. Doesn't matter how far you drive. I don't live here. You don't live anywhere." She stood up, grabbed her keys, heart rattling hard now. Her skin had started to prickle. Static, maybe, or something older. Something buried. The man didn't stop her, didn't even move. He just said one last thing as she turned to leave. "You remember the lake." She froze. The words sliced through her like a piano wire. Not because it meant something, not exactly, but because it almost did. A phantom recollection, something too distant to grasp, a murky feeling. Cold water. Screaming dot outside, the wind had picked up. The air was dry but electric. Somewhere, far off, thunder rolled like a warning. She walked fast too. The car locked the doors the second she slid in and twisted the ignition so hard her knuckles cracked. She didn't look back at the diner. Didn't look at her reflection in the mirror either. Just drove 10 miles out, her phone buzzed. She turned off navigation earlier to save battery. Now it had flipped back on by itself. The screen showed a single location, Danvers Lake to 13 miles east. There was no Danvers Lake, not in Texas, not in the country. As far as she knew, she turned off the phone. It powered itself back on. She kept driving, heart pounding, and every few miles the road. Signs started to change. They didn't list familiar towns anymore. No Dallas, no Fort Worth. Just Danvers Crossing and Lake Turnoff and one sign that simply said "You left something here." She pulled over and threw up on the gravel. The sky was darker now. No stars, no moon. Just that strange, oppressive kind of night that felt like the world had gone to sleep without you. She sat in the car, gripping the wheel, until a new sound made. Her skin crawl, the faint jingle of a bell. She looked up. The man from the diner was walking down the shoulder toward her. No car, no flashlight, no explanation. just walking slow and steady, like he knew exactly where she'd stopped. She gunned the car and peeled out, gravel spitting behind her tires. She didn't stop again until she saw the lake dot. It was sudden, abrupt, like she'd crossed into another place entirely. Trees where there hadn't been any before, a warped wooden dock, black water lapping quietly against the shore. A sign, rusted and bent, that read Danvers Lake, Esta 1966. Her headlights caught the figure of a little girl, standing at the edge of the dock. She slammed the brakes and nearly swerved off the road. The girl didn't move, just stood there, hair matted to her shoulders, bare feet, white nightgown that looked decades out of time. Her head tilted slowly, and Emily felt something buckle in her chest. Not just fear, recognition. That same hair, that same scar just below the chin. That was her, or had been. She stepped out of the car in a daze. The air was colder here, wet. The lake made no sound, but it reflected nothing. Not the sky, not the girl, not even Emily herself. The man was behind her again. She didn't turn. "What is this?" she asked. "It's where you ended," he said. "And where you began?" "I don't remember. You did once. But it hurt too much. So you buried it." She looked at the girl. "That's me. Yes, she drowned." "No," he said. "You drowned. She stayed." Her breath caught. "That doesn't make any sense. You slipped through, long time ago. You've been driving ever since, running from a death that wouldn't stick." Emily turned to him. "Why now? Why find me?" "Because you stopped," he said simply. "You got tired. The road always leads back." She started to cry then, not loud, not dramatic, just silent, stunned tears sliding down her cheeks as she stared at her younger self. "What happens if I go to her?" She remember, "And if I don't, you'll forget again. But not for long. It always comes back." The lake rippled once. The girl on the dock lifted her hand slowly, palm up. Waiting. Emily stepped forward. The dock creaked under her weight. She walked until she stood just beside the girl, close enough to see the shimmer of water clinging to her lashes. She took her hand. The moment they touched, the world turned inside out, not visually, not physically, but in feeling, like a film peeling back. She remembered the water, the fall, the scream, the weight of hands. Not hers, not her parents, someone else. A man, familiar, forgotten. The lake wasn't an accident, and suddenly, she understood why she'd never looked in mirrors, why her own face had started to blur in her memory. The girl blinked once and faded like steam. Emily was alone. The man stood on the shore, watching, not smiling, not satisfied, just resigned. "You're not real," she whispered. He nodded. "Neither are you." And just like that, the lake swallowed the dock. The trees faded. The road was gone. There was only water and sky and the deep, deafening silence of a place that existed solely for remembering. Somewhere miles away, a waitress looked out the window of a dying diner and wondered why the booth in the corner was still warm, why the keys on the table were engraved with a name that hadn't been spoken in 30 years. Emily Danvers, gone again, but not for long. There's a stretch of back road between Lufkin and Hemphill that even the old-timers avoid at night. It's not on any GPS, doesn't show up on Google Maps or Waze. Hell, you won't even find it on a paper atlas. Not that many folks use those anymore. But if you're coming from the east, somewhere off Route 103, there's a fork, a barely visible turnoff past a rust-eaten sign that might have once said something like private property, but now just reads PRAPRY and streaked bullet pot tin. Most folks keep going, but if you're tired, if you're desperate, or maybe just unlucky, you might take that turn. That's what happened to Cole and Mason, two bikers cutting across East Texas on their way to a rally in Jasper. Cole was 38, lean and sun-browned from the road, with an aging Harley he called Lucy and a taste for bad whiskey and worse women. Mason was younger, a transplant from Indiana who rode a matte black Indian Scout with the kind of reverence usually reserved for holy things. They weren't friends, not really. Just fellow riders headed in the same direction who'd ended up on the same stretch of road after a stop at a dive bar in Lufkin where the beer was cold and the bartender wore a Glock on her hip. By dusk, they'd lost time avoiding a wreck on Highway 7. Mason suggested the shortcut. Cole had never heard of it, but he followed anyway. It wasn't a road so much as a gravel scar through pines and swampy pasture land. No lights, no signs, and damn sure no cell service. The sky had turned a sickly orange behind them, bleeding into purple as night fell. Crickets screamed. Something big rustled through the trees, just out of sight. "You sure this is the right way?" Cole called over the engine noise. "Pretty sure," Mason yelled back, though he didn't sound convinced. They passed a field of dead sunflowers, acres of them, gray and bowed like mourners. Then came a rusted-out school bus turned on its side, its windows busted, vines threading through the broken frame. That's when Cole started feeling it. That tingle under your skin, the way your gut knots up when something's watching. He slowed a little. Mason pulled ahead. Not 5 minutes later, they saw it, a small wooden church sitting crooked under a canopy of moss-hung oaks. No name, no cross, no sign. Just a steeple that leaned like a drunk and narrow windows glowing with a soft flicker of candlelight. The gravel road bent around it and disappeared into the woods like a snake's tail. Cole pulled up next to Mason, who'd already killed his engine. "What the hell is this place?" Cole asked, eyes narrowed. "No idea?" "It wasn't on the map," Mason replied. "But there's lights on. Candles," Cole said. "Ain't no electricity." They stared at the church for a while. The front door stood ajar, and from inside came the faint hum of singing, low and melodic, like a hymn you'd half remember from childhood. Something about it was off, though. It wasn't just the absence of signage or the way the building seemed to sag inward. It was that music, that strange pull. "Weird," Mason muttered. "You hear that?" "Yeah, and we should keep moving." "But—" Mason was already walking toward the steps, boots crunching gravel, helmet under one arm. Cole cussed under his breath, shut off Lucy, and followed. The front door creaked as they stepped inside. The church smelled of damp wood, wax, and something faintly metallic, like old blood. The pews were lined with people, all dressed in black, sitting perfectly still. Not a head turned to acknowledge the newcomers. Their faces were hidden in shadow, features obscured by the dancing candlelight. At the far end, a man in a priest's robe stood at the pulpit, back turned, arms slightly raised. He was speaking in a slow, rhythmic tone, a language neither biker recognized. Cole felt suddenly, irrationally cold. The candlelight didn't seem to reach him. Mason nudged him, whispered, "Something ain't right." The priest turned. He was an old man, pale and thin, with gray eyes that shimmered like mica. His smile never quite reached those eyes. "Welcome, travelers," he said. "You've arrived just in time." Cole took a step back. "For what?" The priest opened his arms wider. "For the service. We've been waiting." At that, the congregation began to hum, softly at first, then louder, the same eerie melody they'd heard outside. Their faces were clearer now, and Cole's stomach dropped. Every one of them looked desiccated, skin clinging to bone, eyes too wide, mouths stretched in grins that trembled with effort. They weren't alive. Couldn't be. They looked embalmed, like props in a horror show. Mason turned to run, but the church door slammed shut on its own. sending a gust of wind through the room that snuffed several candles. The shadows deepened. Cole reached for the hunting knife. Strapped to his belt, heart hammering. "What is this place?" Mason shouted. The priest stepped down from the pulpit, robes dragging behind him. "This is consecrated ground," he said, "where the lost are remembered and the unwilling received." The congregation rose as one, their movements jerky and unnatural. Several began stepping over the pews toward the bikers, waxy hands outstretched. Cole lunged forward, knife out, slashing at one of the figures. His blade passed through with sickening ease, slicing something dry and soft like rotted canvas. The thing didn't react, just kept coming. Grinning wider, Mason kicked open a side door near the altar. They bolted through it, stumbling into a cramped room lined with rotting hymnals and a floor thick with mildew. There were portraits on the wall, dozens of them, black and white photographs of people, all staring forward, eyes vacant. Cole froze when he saw one of the photos was of Mason, the same jacket, the same scout tattoo on his neck, same deadpan stare. Underneath, a brass plate read, "Received, August 11th, 1976. "That's not possible." Mason whispered, his face pale. Cole grabbed his arm. "Move!" They shoved through a narrow hallway, pushing past a velvet curtain and out a back door into the woods. The air hit them like a slap, hot, thick, smelling of wet dirt and rot. They ran toward their bikes, the singing still audible, though muffled now as if underwater. When they got back to the road, Cole didn't wait. He fired up Lucy and peeled off, gravel spitting behind him. Mason followed, white-knuckled and silent. They rode hard for nearly an hour before reaching an intersection that looked familiar. The lights of Hemphill twinkled in the distance. When they finally stopped, Cole lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "What the hell was that?" Mason asked, staring back the way they'd come. "I don't know," Cole said, "but we're not going back." They didn't talk about it again. At least, not for a while. A week later, Mason disappeared. Vanished from a motel parking lot outside Nacogdoches. His bike was found, key still in the ignition. No sign of a struggle. Just gone. Cole went back. He told himself it was to find answers, maybe help. But really, it was guilt. He took the same road, found the same fork, and followed it back into that dense, pine-choked stretch of nowhere. The church wasn't there. The clearing was empty, overgrown with vines and wildflowers. No candles, no steeple. Just wind and silence. And the buzzing of flies. Cole left Texas for good not long after. But sometimes, when he sleeps, he dreams of that church, the way it glowed like a lantern in the woods, the way those things in the pews smiled, and the way the priest said they had been waiting. In a dream, Mason sitting in the front row now, grinning, staring straight ahead. Just like in the photo. And the seat beside him is always empty. Always waiting. It always started the same way, or close enough. Empty highways in the dead hours of the morning. A half-tank blinking toward quarter, and a dim blue glow in the distance like a dirty promise. They all ended up there, weary drivers pushing. On through the lonely guts of East Texas, headlights skimming over asphalt seams and coyote roadkill, the static hum of late-night radio bleeding through poor reception. They stopped always at Pump 6, and it was always 3:17 a.m. The place looked unremarkable enough. A Valero just off Highway 155 on the outskirts of Tyler, squatting there like it had been forgotten by time. Dust caked the edges of its sign. Flickering neon casting jaundiced light across cracked pavement. There were 8 pumps total, arranged in 2 staggered rows, each one numbered in faded yellow. The store itself sat behind glass doors perpetually fogged from within. Shelves of off-brand chips and decades-old candy barely lit beneath flickering fluorescence. A narrow field stretched behind it, a no-man's land of weeds, rusted wire, fencing, and the suggestion of something once built and long collapsed. There were no cameras, no real security. Just Pump 6. And the time, 3:17. They didn't all talk to each other. Most didn't even know there were others. The police in Tyler had a few reports on file, scattered and half forgotten. A confused woman in 2011 claiming she'd spoken to her dead sister through the gas nozzle. A long-haul trucker in 2014 found crying behind the station, mumbling something about a child asking to come home. A drifter left a message scrawled in Sharpie inside the men's restroom. Don't answer IT. No one really knew what it was. Jared McComb was the first to connect the dots. He wasn't a detective, not in any official capacity. He'd been a petroleum service technician for 17 years, a man who fixed gas pumps, crawled under them, rebuilt them. In 2019, he was dispatched to the Tyler Valero 3 times in as many months. The first time, it was Pump 6 not registering credit cards. Then it stopped dispensing altogether. Then it simply stopped responding. But that wasn't what got him. Digging. It was what he heard. That last time, July 3rd, he was under the canopy roof, replacing the nozzle assembly, the pump screen glowing faint blue in his periphery. He swore, later, to his wife, to his pastor, to himself, that he heard someone whisper his name. Just once. Just Jared. He thought maybe it was the clerk, a wiry kid with acne and half a soul behind his eyes. But the voice had come from right in front of him, from the nozzle itself, from the damn pump. He stood there, grease on his gloves, pulse, hammering until he heard it again. Jared, you remember the lake, don't you? There was a lake, Lake Tyler, southeast of town. He'd lost a cousin there when he was 12, drowned under mysterious circumstances. No one but his family would have known that. Jared bolted. He never finished the job. A week later, he filed for early retirement. The stories picked up after that. An elderly couple heading home from a wedding in Lufkin stopped for gas, and both heard their deceased son's voice pleading with them through the hum of the pump. A nurse working a double shift claimed she saw her father, who had died of throat cancer years earlier, reflected in the glass, only he wasn't sick anymore. He was smiling. The gas had already stopped pumping, but she couldn't move, couldn't pull away until the clock inside her car ticked over to 3:18. Each story was different in detail, but the same in shape. Always Pump 6. Always 3:17. Always someone speaking, someone who shouldn't have been there. Someone who was dead or missing or worse. The town never officially acknowledged it. The gas station changed ownership 3 times in the past decade, and each new manager inherited the problem like a festering wound beneath the floorboards. They replaced the entire fuel control unit once. Didn't fix it. One guy, name was Artis, mid-40s, ex-Army, tried sealing the pump off altogether. They say he welded the nozzle closed, wrapped it in heavy chains, bolted a steel plate over the screen. It was still wrapped up tight the night he killed himself in the back. Office, no note, just a single sentence written on the whiteboard by the coffee pot. It won't stop talking. Then there was Denny Lawton. Local, 31, divorced amateur ghost hunter with a podcast that got maybe 24 listeners on a good month. He got obsessed. Claimed it was a temporal fracture, some kind of energy echo trapped in time. He visited Pump 6 every night for 2 weeks, waiting for the moment. He brought EMF readers, audio recorders, even a cheap thermal camera. Nothing. Then one night, his live broadcast cut out at 3:16 a.m. When police found his car the next morning, it was still idling at Pump 6, Driver's door wide open, gas nozzle in the tank. Denny was never found. They eventually reopened the pump. People still used it, but always during the day. Locals knew better. The ones who remembered the stories, the real stories, not the ones sanitized for the internet. They made a point to steer clear. But travelers didn't know. Travelers kept showing up. Like Lindsay Arnold. She was 27, driving alone from Dallas to Shreveport after a weekend with friends. She hadn't planned on stopping, but her tank was dipping and her eyelids heavier than they should have been. The Valero was the only light for miles. She pulled in, rolled down the window, blinked away the tiredness. Her car clock read 3:16 by the time she stepped out. The wind had picked up, a warm, static-charged gust that made the hairs on her arms stand up. The pump was empty. No other cars. The convenience store looked closed, but the pumps were still running. She inserted her card, selected unleaded, and gripped the nozzle. The sound came faintly at first, like someone talking through a pane of glass, just below audible clarity. She frowned, leaned in. The pump hummed. Fuel began to flow. Then a voice clear as breath. "Don't leave me here, Linz." She froze. It wasn't just familiar. It was impossible. Her older brother Kyle had died in 2018, suicide. Left a note. Left a mess. She hadn't heard his voice in years. And now it was coming from a goddamn gas pump in East Texas? You didn't come to the funeral. She staggered back, letting the nozzle clatter to the ground. The pump kept running. The fuel kept spilling. She should have run. Should have gotten in her car and driven until the sun came up. But she didn't. She stood there, transfixed, trembling, as the voice began to weep. "It's cold. Why won't you help me?" She doesn't remember much after that. Just flashes, her face in the pump screen, but it wasn't her face. Her hands slick with gasoline. A feeling of being submerged. Her car was found the next morning, idling at pump 6, door wide open. She was sitting in the front seat, unharmed but unresponsive, eyes wide open, mouth moving soundlessly. She never spoke again. The gas station's still there. Pump 6 still works, more or less. People still stop, truckers with fried nerves, kids on midnight runs, strangers passing through who don't know better. Most of them don't notice anything, but a few do. And if you're one of them, if you happen to be there when the sky goes darkest and the wind shifts just right, if your car clock blinks 3:17 and you hear your name whispered in the static, don't answer. Don't listen, because whoever, whatever, is talking through that pump, it remembers you. It was supposed to be just a stop for the night. Brian Maddox had been driving for 10 hours, heading west along I-20 through the flat, baking stretch of Texas between Midland and Odessa. He was running late for a refinery inspection outside El Paso and didn't feel like pushing through another 4 hours in the dark, half blind from fatigue and road glare. His eyes were dry, and his mouth tasted like old gum. He passed a billboard half faded by the Sun-Dead Zone Motel. Next exit. Clean, quiet, vacancy. The clean part was handwritten in red marker, like someone had added it recently to boost appeal. Brian chuckled, pulled off the highway onto a 2-lane blacktop that peeled off into the dark desert, and followed a winding gravel road until a single-story building rose into view. It looked like something from a 1970s postcard, long and low, with turquoise paint peeling in strips and a neon sign out front that blinked motel in garish red. The parking lot was empty, save for one sun-bleached pickup truck near the front door. The air was heavy with dust and stillness. No bugs chirped, no wind. Just the crunch of gravel under his tires and the hum of his engine. He parked, killed the engine, and stepped out into the heat. The sky was a dull purple bruise, the sun long gone but its memory lingering in the ground. Brian grabbed his overnight bag, walked to the front office, and pushed open the door. The bell over the door didn't chime. It looked like it had been yanked out years ago. Inside, the room smelled like mothballs and pine sol. The wallpaper was yellowing at the edges, curling like dead leaves. Behind the counter stood a woman. She looked to be in her late 50s, maybe early 60s. Her hair was too black, too stiff, obviously dyed and sprayed into a helmet. Her face was powdered, her lips painted with a color that was almost red but veered too close to rust. She wore a name tag, Mara. "Evenin'," she said, her voice thin and raspy, like wind through old curtains. Brian gave a polite nod. "Need a room." Just for the night. Mara didn't blink. She just stared, her mouth twitching. Then she said, "Do you remember me now?" Brian froze for a second. He looked at her again, trying to place her face. Maybe she thought he was someone else, some guy who'd stayed here before. He gave a half smile. "No, I don't think we've met." "No," she said softly. "Not yet, but you will." That struck him as odd, but he chalked it up to small-town weirdness. He'd seen plenty of it over the years: clerks, gas station attendants, hotel managers who lived too far from civilization and started to crack under the weight of heat and boredom. She slid a paper form toward him. "Room 6, far end." Brian filled it out, signed, and handed over his card, which she didn't even swipe. She just took it, glanced at it, and said, "You'll want to keep your curtains shut tonight. Sometimes the wind brings echoes." He let out a small laugh. "Wind's dead still out there." Mara's smile stretched too wide. "Not that kind of wind?" She handed him a key, an actual metal key on a cracked plastic fob that read 6, and Brian turned to go. "Brian," she said as he reached the door. He turned, stiffening. "Yeah? Don't forget me this time." He didn't respond. He just walked out, got back in his car, and drove down the strip of cracked asphalt that ran along the motel's front. He pulled up in front of room 6, killed the engine again, and sat for a minute. That last thing she'd said had chilled him. How the hell did she know his name? He hadn't spoken it. He shook it off, grabbed his bag, and stepped into the room. It was exactly what he expected. Old twin bed with a floral bedspread, cigarette. Burns on the knitstand, yellow light from a single lamp in the corner. The air conditioner rattled in the wall like it had been coughing for years. He locked the door, drew the faded curtains shut, and flopped onto the bed, still dressed. The air felt thick. The sheets were scratchy. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, the world tilted. Not like sleep was coming, more like he was falling forward, into something. He dreamed he was 12 again, standing in a hallway lit by flickering fluorescence. The walls were green tile, the kind you only see in hospitals or mental wards. Water dripped somewhere. A smell like rotting Lilith filled the air. Down the hallway, someone called his name soft, dragging the syllables like they were made of wet cloth. "Brian." He turned. A woman stood at the far end, backlit by a blinking exit sign. He couldn't see her face, but her hair was a stiff black helmet. She wore a white dress stained with something dark around the hem. She stepped toward him slowly. "Do you remember me now?" Brian woke with a jerk. The room was completely dark. The lamp was off, even though he hadn't touched it. The AC had stopped rattling, total silence. Not even the electric hum of the wall clock. He reached for his phone, dead. No signal, no battery, nothing. That was impossible. He'd charged it in the car. He got up, heart racing. Pulled open the curtains. Outside, nothing. No streetlight, no stars. Just blackness, thick as tar. He pressed his face to the window. Something moved in the dark, just past the edge of the parking lot. He saw it in the Fendi Furatunatin. Split second, his breath fogged the glass, a figure standing perfectly still, too far to make out details. He blinked. It was closer. He stepped back, panic welling. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe a hitchhiker. Maybe Mara had another guest. He opened the door. "Hey," he called out, his voice trembling. The figure didn't move. Then it stepped forward and he saw her. Mara, but not as she had looked earlier. Her skin sagged, grayed, like it had been soaking in water too long. Her eyes were dark pits. Her dress was soaked with black, dripping onto the gravel. "Do you remember me now?" Brian slammed the door, bolted it, stumbled backward. The walls started to hum low at first, then louder, vibrating the air. The mirror on the wall cracked. He looked into it, but the face that looked back wasn't his. It was a boy. Him at 12, pale, shaking. Blood on his shirt. He remembered. The woman, the car. He'd been in Odessa once, years ago, with his father. Drunk, raging, yelling that his mother had ruined him. Brian had climbed into the front seat of the old station wagon when his dad went into the motel office. He remembered the keys in the ignition. He remembered twisting them, the car rolling. Someone screaming, a woman. She'd been walking across the parking lot. She had dropped her keys. He hadn't seen her until the bumper hit. She died there, and his father had made him forget. Paid off the cops. Moved towns. Changed the story. But memories rot in the dark, and rot has a smell. And something had brought him back. The room shook now. The window shattered inward. Wind screamed through the broken glass. Brian fell to the floor, clutching his head. Voices poured in, overlapping, chanting his name, calling him a murderer. And over it all, Mara's voice. "You forgot." But I didn't. He crawled to the door, tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The keyhole bled rust. The walls bled something thicker. Outside, the other motel doors opened one by one. Figures stepped out, all wrong, slouched, dripping, faces hidden. They formed a circle around his room. "Do you remember me now?" He screamed until his throat tore, and then dashed silence. In the morning, the sun rose over the desert like nothing had happened. A couple driving west on I-20 spotted a strange thing as they passed an old side road and abandoned car. Dusty, parked in front of a rundown motel. The neon sign flickered, motel. Inside, the front office was empty. No sign of the clerk. No records. Just a name tag on the counter, Mara, and a smell like rotting lily. Room 6 was locked from the inside. Police forced the door open, found the room empty except for a cracked mirror, a smear of blood on the wall, and a child's. Shirt balled up in the corner, too small, too old, and stained dark with time. They never found Brian Maddox. But sometimes, late at night, if you take that gravel road off the interstate, you'll see the sign flicker to life. The parking lot will be empty. The air will be too still. And a woman at the front desk will smile at you with rust-colored lips. "Do you remember me now?" It started the way these kinds of things usually do, quietly, with no real reason to notice anything at first. Just something small, something easily dismissed. You're on a Texas highway late at night, US 90, somewhere between Houston and San Antonio, and there's an old red pickup truck in your rear view. Not unusual. That road runs flat and quiet for miles, flanked by brittle grass and the occasional weather-beaten billboard advertising a steakhouse that probably shut down years ago. It's the kind of stretch that eats time and memory. You blink and you're 20 miles from where you thought you were. The first person who really talked about the truck, really talked, was a woman named Jolene Price. Lived in Katy, worked nights at the Memorial Herman A. Ain Sugar Land. She was used to long drives, often got off her shift when it was still dark. Jolene wasn't prone to paranoia, and her husband said she had the nerves of a stone wall. But something got to her that morning, and she came home white as a sheet, locking every door, pacing like an animal that smells smoke. She told him about the truck. Said it started following her just past Seguin, a long straightaway before you. Hit the clusters of oilfield service depots. It was far enough behind that she couldn't make out the driver, but close enough that she knew it was keeping pace. Every time she sped up, it did too. If she slowed, it eased back. Never passed, never dropped off. She figured it was a coincidence. Long road, sparse traffic. Sometimes cars just match rhythms. But she said something about the windows that bothered her. They were black, not tinted, black. As in no glass, no reflection, can't see anything black. And the longer it followed her, the more it felt wrong. Like there was no driver at all. No headlights either, she said. Not even the dull glow you'd expect from a dashboard. Just a dead red truck with black windows that hummed along silently. Her. Husband didn't believe her. Thought it was fatigue. But he found her shoes by the front door the next night. Keys still in the lock, car parked perfectly in the driveway. TV was on static. Lights out. Jolene was gone. She wasn't the only one. In early August, a mechanic named Travis Rudd from Flatonia vanished while driving home from a friend's bachelor party in Houston. His wife filed a report after he didn't show. The state troopers found his car on the shoulder of US 90, empty, no sign of struggle. Engine off, driver's door open. Dust had already begun settling on the seat. His phone was inside, unlocked. Last text was to his wife at 2:13 a.m. Red truck still behind me. Nothing after that. Word spread in patches. A Facebook post here. A panic tweet there. A thread on Reddit gained some traction. People describing the same thing. Always at night, always between the cities. A red truck, black windows. No license plate. No logo, no bumper stickers. No wear and tear beyond the faded paint and some scratches on the tailgate like claw marks. A girl in her 20s said she tried to pull off and let it pass, figuring maybe it was some creeper or lunatic. But when she took the exit to Gonzales, the truck took it too. She merged back onto the highway. It merged right behind. She swerved and floored it to lose it and nearly wrecked, but when she looked back, it was gone. Not miles behind, just gone. The local cops couldn't do much. Hard to report a vehicle when you don't have a plate, a make, or even a clear view of the driver. And nothing technically criminal was happening. Just a case of a strange truck following people on public roads. Except, of course, for the disappearances. Then came that night in mid-September. The storm rolled in hard and sudden, throwing lightning like javelins across the prairie. A couple, Michael and Darla Foster, were driving home from a wedding in San Antonio, heading east when their SUV got a flat just outside of Shiner. No cell signal. They were pulling the spare out when they noticed headlights coming up behind them. They were relieved at first. Figured it was help. Then they saw it. Red truck. No lights, but it was visible in the storm flashes. Sat still about 50 yards back. Just idling. Michael waved. No reaction. He walked toward it. Got about halfway before the truck's engine cut out and it rolled forward, slowly, without sound, as if gravity was pulling it down an invisible slope. He ran back to the SUV. They got inside, locked the doors, and waited. The truck never reached them. Just stopped again, closer now, and stayed. Darla snapped photos. None came out right, all blurred, like something had smeared the lens from the inside. They said it sat there for nearly an hour, just humming. Then it turned off entirely. Lights dead, engine silent. But when lightning hit again, the truck was gone. No tire marks, no sound of departure. Just empty highway. Michael started drinking after that. Darla wouldn't drive at night. Both eventually moved to Kansas to live with her parents. What really nailed it into local lore was the dashcam footage. A trucker named Alvin Castillo, long haul, ran the I-10 corridor weekly, had a forward and rear-facing camera. One week around 3 a.m., he caught a red truck tailing him, no headlights, just barely outside braking distance. He toggled his trailer lights, trying to signal it to pass. No change. The footage shows the truck creeping up behind, vanishing from frame as it gets too close. Alvin pulls into a rest stop. The red truck rolls past slow. It's clearer than any photo before it. Rust-red body, no visible driver, black windows like liquid obsidian. But the tape glitches the moment it moves ahead, skips. When it stabilizes again, the truck is gone. Disappeared in plain daylight. Not even a tail light on the horizon. Alvin quit trucking the following month. The running theory, if you can call it that, is that the red truck doesn't follow people by accident. It picks them. And it doesn't matter where you're coming from, what you believe, or what kind of car you drive. If you see it once, that might be all. But if you see it twice, you're on its list. Nobody's seen it 3 times and lived to tell about it. That's the story. But here's the part nobody mentions out loud. The real quiet fear. The red truck doesn't always drive behind you. Sometimes it waits up ahead, like it knows where you're going. He hadn't meant to be in Fort Stockton that night. The plan had been to make it to El Paso before midnight, but a missed exit outside Azona and the kind of fatigue that creeps into your bones like something alive had made him pull off I-10. The sun had set hard, like a dropped curtain, and now the West Texas sky was black as burnt paper. His rental car, a low-slung Nissan with a wheezing AC and a broken O-port, rolled into the parking lot of a fast food place glowing like a dying bug zapper. No one else was there except for a lone truck idling by the side. Inside, behind, fogged-up windows, a kid in a red visor mopped the floor. It was nearly midnight. He parked around back, more out of habit than intention, where the delivery trucks come in and the grease bins sweat. There's a kind of quiet in Texas nights that's different than anywhere else. Not peaceful, not empty, just waiting. The cicadas were long gone, the wind was dead, and everything in that alley behind the restaurant felt like it was holding its breath. He was halfway through lighting a cigarette when he heard the first scream. It wasn't a human scream, not in the usual sense. Not the kind you hear in a horror movie or from some drunk yelling into the dark. It was higher-pitched, breathless, and somehow wet. It came from the dumpster, a big black metal box with chipped paint and a crooked lid. He stood still, match flickering out between his fingers. The scream came again. It sounded like a child. He moved toward it slowly, not out of fear, but because some animal part of his brain told him the noise didn't belong here. He'd heard children scream before on playgrounds, in panic, even in pain, but this wasn't that. This was something trying very hard to sound like a child and just barely getting it wrong. He reached the dumpster and placed a hand on the cold metal. Another scream ripped out, louder now, shriller. It felt like it came from inside his skull. He jerked the lid open. Nothing. Just black plastic bags, half torn open by something sharp. The smell of rancid fryer oil and old meat hit him like a slap. He blinked, leaned in. That's when he saw it. A single white baby shoe, small enough to fit in the palm of his hand, resting neatly on a stack of trash bags. Beside it, soaked into a wad of red and yellow employee uniform, was a dark maroon stain that could only be blood. He stepped back fast, heartbeat kicking up. The scream was gone now. Just silence. He waited. Nothing. The door to the kitchen clanged open, and the mop kid stuck his head out. "Hey, we're closed," he called. "I know," the traveler said, voice raspier than he meant. "I just thought I heard something." The kid stared at him. "From the dumpster?" He nodded. The kid's eyes narrowed, and for a second, something passed over his face. Not fear, something more like recognition. Then he stepped out and lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "People hear stuff back there. Screams, crying sometimes. A guy saw something crawl out once." The traveler frowned. "What kind of something?" The kid shook his head. "Didn't say. Just said it wasn't right. Quit 2 hours later." The wind picked up for the first time all night, sending a paper bag skittering across the lot. The kid took a drag and looked at the dumpster like it was a grave. "They never emptied it," he said. "City came out, said it was clean, but stuff still shows up. That shirt, that shoe? I saw him last week. Then they were gone. Now they're back." "You telling me you've seen that exact baby shoe before?" "Yeah, and that same shirt. Why didn't anyone report it?" He laughed, short and bitter. "To who? Cops don't give a damn about this part of town. Last time someone called in a body, it was a sack of potatoes with red paint on it. They said prank. Case closed." The traveler looked back at the dumpster. It hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound. But it felt different now, like it knew they were talking about it. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he checked into a rundown motel a mile away and sat at the edge of the bed, trying to forget the scream and failing. Something about it wormed into him, that wet pleading sound. Like it didn't just want help, it wanted out. He left Fort Stockton at dawn. Didn't even bother with coffee. But 2 hours into the drive, a strange smell began to fill the car grease. Rot and something sharp. He pulled over at a rest stop and opened the trunk. The baby shoe was there, sitting right on top of his luggage. He slammed the trunk shut and drove until the mountains started to bleed into the sky. He didn't stop again, not for gas, not for food. But that night in the motel in Tucson, the smell was back, stronger, and the screams came again. They came from the bathroom this time. Not loud, barely more than a whisper, but unmistakable. He threw open the door and found the sink filled with cold, murky water. Floating in it was the red and yellow shirt. Still wet. Still blood-stained. He left the motel at midnight, didn't even take his bag. Drove until the sky turned silver. But everywhere he went, it followed. The shoe in the glove box. The shirt in the dresser drawer. The screaming in the vents. He tried to ditch the car. Switched rentals in Las Cruces. Burned the old one out in the desert. But the next morning, it was there. Shoe on the dashboard. Shirt in the backseat. And one day, while he was parked outside a diner in New Mexico, trying not to cry, a man slid into the passenger seat without asking. "You opened it," the man said. His skin was too pale for this part of the country, and his eyes were flat. "Didn't you?" The traveler nodded slowly. "They always do," the man said. "That dumpster's older than the town, older than the road. Some places just catch things. Bad things, hungry things. It used to be then a pig pit, then a trash heap, now a dumpster. It don't matter what you call it. What is it?" The traveler asked, throat tight. The man smiled. "It's where the screams go when nobody listens." And then he was gone. Since then, the traveler hasn't stayed anywhere more than one night. He doesn't talk much, doesn't eat much, doesn't sleep at all. The screams are louder now, almost constant. And the smell? It's in his skin. He's taken to scrubbing himself raw, but it doesn't help. He went back once, just once, to Fort Stockton. The fast food place was gone, burned down, nothing left but concrete and weeds. But the dumpster? It was still there, clean, empty, open. He didn't look inside this time. Just left something behind. Something small. A baby shoe. Now he drives and waits, and sometimes, when he parks too close to alleys or trash bins, he hears it again. That scream, still wet, still pleading, still not human. The flight from Atlanta landed late, and by the time Mark Ellison stepped out of his rental car and into the stifling July heat of downtown Dallas, it was past midnight. He was tired in the way only business travel makes you tired. Too many meetings, too much shaking hands, too much smiling when all you want to do is collapse face first into a bed that doesn't smell like strangers. The hotel was a boxy 10-story slab of faded concrete nestled between a gas station and a pawn shop. Not the kind of place a man in his position would normally stay. But the company card had a glitch, and this was all they could manage on short notice. The concierge was asleep behind the desk when he arrived, slouched on a stool with a blanket over his knees and an old transistor radio, playing soft blues behind the counter. The man barely stirred when Mark rang the bell. He squinted one red eye open, slid a single key across the counter, an actual key, not a card, and muttered, "Room 413. Mark took the elevator up. The ride was slow and clunky, and he had to hold the 4 button in or the light would go out. The hallway on the 4th floor was long and dim, with carpet that might have been red once but now looked the color of old blood. It smelled faintly of mildew and something sweeter like spoiled fruit. Room 413 was at the end of the hall. He opened the door, stepped inside, and stood there blinking. It was normal, almost disappointingly normal. Standard hotel fare, bed, with a brown floral patterned comforter, TV bolted to the dresser, small round table with 2 chairs, bathroom just off to the right. A single lamp by the bed gave off a dull yellow glow. He dropped his suitcase and collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. The silence of the room was immense. Not peaceful, just empty. He closed his eyes. When he woke, the lamp was off. The room was lit only by the faint light of dawn squeezing through the thick curtains. He sat up grudgingly, still in yesterday's shirt and slacks. His mouth tasted like metal and dust. He walked to the bathroom. The light flickered when he turned it on but stayed steady. He splashed cold water on his face, stared at himself in the mirror. Pale, tired, the shadow of a man who once had a wife, 2 kids, a house near Grapevine Lake. All gone now. He turned to go back into the main room and froze. The door to the hallway was gone. Where it had been just to the left of the table, there was now another wall. Same cheap beige wallpaper. Same ugly framed painting of a desert road under a red sky. He blinked, walked over to it, touched the wall. Solid. No seam, no indentation. Just blank wall where the door should have been. A slow creeping tightness spread in his chest. He looked back toward the bathroom. Maybe it was the wrong wall. Maybe. He was just disoriented, but the bathroom was still to his right, the bed to his left. The table and chairs hadn't moved. The room was exactly the same, except the door was gone. He backed up slowly, turned in a slow circle. Then he noticed something else. There was a door, but it wasn't the door he'd come in through. This one was near the foot of the bed, where there hadn't been a door before. It was the same shape, same bland color, but it hadn't been there last night. He opened it. Beyond it was another room. Same layout. Same bed, same lamp, same brown carpet. He stepped inside. Behind him, the door clicked shut. He turned. The door was gone. He was standing in another room, 413. It was identical in every way, except for one small thing, the painting above the bed. In the first room, it had been a landscape of desert under a red sky. In this room, it was a forest. Bare trees, no leaves, black silhouettes twisted against a gray sky. His skin crawled. He opened the bathroom door. Same flickering light, same mirror. Except now, when he looked at his reflection, there was something wrong with his eyes. Just a hint of darkness around the irises. He leaned in, blinked. The shadows vanished. Maybe he imagined it. He turned. Back. Another door now stood to the left of the dresser. He opened it. Another room. Same again. Except now the comforter had a large tier across the center. He walked through. The room sealed behind him. He tried to go back. Nothing there. Just wall. Panic. Gnawed at his spine. He began opening doors at random. Each one led to another version of the same room. One had the lamp knocked over. One had no painting at all. One had the bed made with crisp white sheets instead of brown. He started running. Room to room to room. Some were almost perfect copies. Others, not so much. In one, the bathroom mirror was cracked in a spiderweb pattern with tiny drops of something dark flecked along the edges. In another, the walls were covered in handprints, small ones, like a child's, but smeared and distorted. He screamed, pounded his fists against a wall until the skin on his knuckles split. No response. The rooms began to feel warmer, stale. Oppressive. At some point, he passed through a room where the TV was on, static hissing. No picture. A voice, low and male, was whispering something too soft to make out. He turned it off, but when he walked into the next room, the TV was already on. He stopped counting rooms around 50. Then the rooms started changing faster. One had no light at all. He stumbled through it in pitch blackness, hearing faint breathing. Behind him the whole time, one had writing on the walls. It looked like red marker at first, until he smelled it. It said, "Don't sleep." Another room was colder than the others. The air turned his breath to fog. And in that room, he saw movement under the bed. Something long and pale slid just out of view when he crouched to look. He stayed only long enough to reach the next door. The rooms continued. In one, the bathroom door was locked. Something knocked on the other side 3 times, slowly. He didn't open it. His phone was dead. His watch had stopped at 3:17 a.m. He lost track of time. He stopped trying to count how many rooms he'd passed through. His voice grew hoarse from yelling. His throat dried out. His stomach cramped from hunger. Then came the room with no doors at all. Just 4 walls. A bed, a table, a TV hissing static. He screamed until his voice broke. He punched the walls, kicked the furniture, threw the lamp. Nothing changed. He sat on the bed. After what felt like hours, he noticed something new. The painting above the bed, it showed a hotel room. Not a desert, not a forest, but an exact rendering of the room he was in, down to the folds in the sheets. And a scuff on the wall. And in the painting, a man sat on the bed. He stood slowly, approached the painting. The man in the painting stood 2. Mark raised a hand. The figure in the painting did the same. Not a reflection. A copy. A portrait. He pressed his hand against the wall. The man in the painting smiled. Mark did not. He took a step back. The painting changed. Now the man in the painting was lying down. The sheets were pulled up over his face. Mark turned away. The door had returned, but he didn't want to open it. He stood there for a long time. Eventually, he did. And stepped into the next room. The air over Galveston was wet and heavy, like it was trying to settle into your lungs and stay there. That kind of swampy humidity that clings to you even when you're not sweating, that makes your shirt stick to your back 10 minutes after getting out of your car. It was late September, around the time when the Gulf starts teasing you with cooler weather, but never really delivers. I was driving west on Seawall Boulevard, cutting across town on my way to Houston, though I didn't have to be there at any particular time. It was more of a drifting road trip, a way to lose myself after the divorce. No itinerary, no reservations, just me and whatever highway looked best that morning. I hadn't planned on stopping in Galveston. I figured I'd keep moving until sundown, find a motel somewhere closer to the mainland. But my gas light came on, and the next exit dropped me off near one of those old stations that looked like it hadn't changed since 1983. The kind with a single island of pumps and a weather-beaten awning, one lonely flickering bulb dangling. Overhead, the Gulf wind had pushed some sand up against the curb, and the parking lot was cracked, littered with bottle caps and cigarette butts. There was an old man sitting in a plastic lawn chair just outside the store entrance, his boots planted wide and steady like he'd been carved there. He was thin, leathery, with a long gray ponytail and a stare like a crow's, flat and sharp. He wore a tan shirt, clean but faded, with the sleeves rolled up past his elbows. I filled the tank, leaned into the wind for a second, then walked over to ask if there was a better route out of town than following the GPS. Mine kept glitching, pointing me back toward the ocean like it wanted me to turn around and drown. "Scusa me," I said, and he looked up real slow like he'd been expecting me but wasn't sure he liked what he saw. "You trying to get off the island?" he asked, voice low, steady like a tractor engine. "Yeah, GPS is acting weird. I'm heading west, maybe toward San Antonio eventually." He nodded once, then tilted his head slightly, studying me the way you'd study a dog acting funny. "Not quite dangerous, but worth keeping your eye on. You came over the bridge on I-45 about 40 minutes ago. Took a detour through La Marque, then looped down along Harborside. Stopped at a Dollar General for a Coke and Tylenol. Got back on the road, changed your mind at the light by the seafood place, turned left instead of right. Thought you'd head inland, but your gut told you to follow the coast a little longer. You weren't going to stop for gas, but the warning light came on just after the train tracks." I stood there for a moment, not breathing. "That's right," I said finally. "How'd?" "You?" He smiled, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth. "You're gonna keep going west. Stay on the road another hour and 20, give or take. Then your rear driver's side tire'll blow. Soft leak, real slow, already started. You won't notice till you're in the middle of nowhere. 2-lane blacktop, no shoulder, swamp. On both sides, you'll try to change it yourself, but the jack won't hold right. Ground's too soft. About then, a truck'll come up. Green Ford, old one. Man driving won't say much, just point at the tire and offer to help. You'll be glad to see him at first." I swallowed. "You're screwing with me." His smile didn't change. "You'll let him help. Won't think twice, 'cause he looks harmless. Skinny, maybe 70, one lazy eye, like he's seeing through you. He'll work quiet, fast. Then he'll ask where you're headed, and you'll tell him. Doesn't matter what you say, he already knows. He knows the route. Always has. Then he'll say something that won't make sense at first. Something like, "You seen the shadows in your mirror yet?" That's when you'll start to feel it. I laughed nervously and looked around the lot, expecting someone else to come out, maybe another customer, anyone to confirm this wasn't some elaborate prank. "What the hell are you talking about?" "The shadows," he said simply. "Been tailing you since you left Beaumont. One in the passenger side mirror, other in the rear view. Ain't your headlights playing tricks? They move wrong. Don't blink when you pass under lights. They get closer every time you second guess yourself." "I didn't come through Beaumont," I said, almost too fast. His eyes narrowed. "Yeah, you did. You just don't remember. That part's been taken from you." I turned to walk back to my car, shaking my head, telling myself I just met some Gulf Coast lunatic. Too much sun. Too many years alone with the ghosts of hurricanes. But he called after me. "You'll see the girl first." She be on the shoulder about 3 miles before the tire goes. Won't look right. She's all jaw and no eyes. You'll tell yourself she's just a hallucination, but you'll stop. The car anyway, you always do. Every version of you does. I turned back, but he was already getting up from the chair and walking inside. I stood there a minute longer, trying to collect myself, then climbed into the car and drove off. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Lucky guess about the detour, the Dollar General, the seafood place. Maybe he saw the bottle of Tylenol in my front seat. Maybe he watched the store cameras, knew how long I'd been on the road. That made sense, didn't it? But about 20 minutes later, the rear driver's side tires started to thump. Not a blowout, just a rhythm, a soft hump that matched my heartbeat. I kept going. Told myself it was a pebble caught in the tread. But the pressure light came on and the car started to pull slightly left. And then, there she was. Just like he said, standing on the shoulder, barefoot, in what looked like a faded school uniform, though the colors were bleached by the sun. Her hair hung in wet clumps around her face, and when I slowed, I saw she had no eyes, just the suggestion of sockets, like water-worn hollows in soft wood. Her jaw hung too low, skin stretched like clay, and something was wrong with the length of her arms. Too long, too loose. She didn't wave. She didn't move at all. I didn't stop, not this time. I punched the gas and kept going until the tire finally gave out for real. I pulled off to the edge, heart pounding, hands slick on the wheel. No cell signal, no cars, just cicadas and heat. The road was cracked and overgrown at the edges, surrounded by brush and half-flooded ditch on either side. I popped the trunk, got the jack, and tried to lift the car. The ground gave way. He was. Right. Then I heard the engine. A green Ford, late 70s, pulled up behind me, slowed to a stop. The driver stepped out, thin, old, lazy left eye. Trouble? He asked. I didn't answer. He knelt beside the wheel without waiting, examined the damage. His movements were smooth, practiced. I could smell oil on him and something else, something earthy, like dead leaves. You know where you're headed? He asked, not looking up. I said nothing. He chuckled once under his breath. Don't worry, you'll get there. You always do. Then he looked up at me and smiled, and I saw the same thing in his eyes that I'd seen in the girl, that wet, hungry blankness, as if his face was just something he wore over whatever waited underneath. He stood slowly, cracked his knuckles. I'll take you the rest of the way, he said. Ain't far now. I ran. Into the brush, into the heat, into the low whine of bugs and the rising shriek of something that wasn't a bird, wasn't anything I'd ever heard on this side of the world. I don't know how long I ran. Long enough to get away, long enough to forget what road I'd been on. I found a ranger station at the edge of a wildlife preserve. They let me use the phone. Towed my car. The man at the garage said there wasn't any leak. No puncture, no soft tread. The tire looked fine. I haven't driven west since, but sometimes I see the girl again. Sometimes in the mirror, and sometimes when I least expect it. I see that green Ford idling behind me in traffic, and I know I'm still on the route. The air outside McAllen had that thick, electric tension that came before a South Texas thunderstorm, the kind where the sky swells heavy and yellow at the edges and the heat doesn't break until the lightning does. I was headed west out of town on a solo drive meant to clear. MY head after a bad stretch of months that had started with a divorce and ended with me quitting a job I'd had for 9 years. I figured the open road would shake off the rust inside my bones. I'd packed light cooler, phone, flashlight, a few snacks, a map just in case, but mostly I just wanted to drive without talking, listening to the dull hum of the wheels on the asphalt, watching the scrubland stretch out into that strange, empty beauty only Texas can manage. I'd left McAllen at about 2 in the afternoon, aiming to make it to Del Rio by nightfall. Just past La Jolla, I veered off the 83 to take a lesser road farm to market 2221, I think. I remember choosing it because it looked like a shortcut. It wasn't. The pavement was rough, faded gray, cracked in places like dried skin. There were mesquite trees lining the ditches, and more than once I saw the gleam of a dead deer's eyes from the side of the road. A place where the wind didn't bother moving unless something spooked it. That road narrowed into another I didn't catch the name of. No signs, just a rusted pole where one might have been. The GPS on my phone lost signal around that time, but I kept going. The sun was starting to sink, but there was still good light when it happened. Whatever it was. I pulled off to the side of the road because I thought I heard a noise. Something strange, a metallic thump or scrape. At first, I assumed it was the engine. I got out, walked a slow loop around the car. Nothing seemed off. Tires looked good. No steam. I opened the hood and stared at the guts of the thing like I had any idea what to look for. I didn't. Then, I heard a knock at the window. I spun so fast I almost tripped. But there was no one there. Just the car sitting quiet, the door I'd left open hanging wide, my driver's seat empty. I walked back over, heart thudding, eyes scanning the brush. Not a single car had passed in over an hour, and I hadn't seen a house or driveway in miles. I shut the door, got back inside, and sat for a moment gripping the wheel with both hands, trying to convince myself it was the wind or maybe a bird. But I knew it wasn't. I knew what a knock on glass sounded like, the deliberate rhythm of bone on window pane. Then things went blank. I remember that moment, the breath I took right after settling into my seat. And then nothing. Not a blur, not a dream, just black space in my memory. No sense of time passing. Just ... gone. The next thing I knew, I was awake again, if that's the word for it, with my face pressed against the steering wheel, the sun. Gone, and the cabin lit only by the dashboard glow, and my front left tire was missing. Not flat. Not blown out. Missing. The whole damn thing rim and all gone like someone had unscrewed the lugs and carried it off. The car listed hard to that. Corner, the axle scraping into the gravel. I sat up slowly, my neck stiff like I'd been sleeping wrong. My hands were trembling. I looked around, hard hammering, the silence outside thick enough to choke on. No lights, no engines, no sound. Just a faint rustling from the brush. The kind of noise you don't want to admit as footsteps. I opened the door and got out, flashlight in hand. The beam swung across the edge of the road and hit the spot where the tire should have been. No sign of it. Just empty space and dust. The bolts lay scattered in the dirt, 5 little teeth glinting under the beam. I walked a slow circle around the car, whispering a stream of quiet curses, trying to keep my voice calm. But I couldn't help it. Something was wrong, not just the tire, not just the blackout. The very air felt off, like I was breathing in. Someone else's dream. I reached for my phone. Dead. Wouldn't turn on, wouldn't charge. No matter what I tried. It was fully charged when I left McAllen. The map I'd brought was in the glove box, but it didn't show the road I was on. It barely showed anything but the major highways. I'd gone too far off the grid. Too far into the cracks. I decided to walk. I grabbed my water and a flashlight and started down the road, picking the direction that felt right. The stars were out, and in that moonless sky, they looked cruel and sharp, like needles sewn into black velvet. The road stretched on, and the brush on either side seemed to close in tighter the farther I went. And then came the noise again, not a knock this time, a click, like a camera shutter. Soft and distant. Then again, closer. I stopped walking. Flashlight. Off. I stood there in the dark, breathing through my nose, my ears straining. Another click. My eyes started to adjust and I saw something. Someone standing up ahead, maybe 30 feet. A silhouette. Just standing in the road, facing me. No features. Just the shape. Thin, long arms. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. I turned on the flashlight and aimed it forward. Nothing there. Just empty road. I turned back. The silhouette was now behind me. I ran. I don't know for how long. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30. The road felt endless. But eventually, I came to a house. Old, one-story concrete block, a porch sagging in the middle like a broken back. No lights on. I banged on the door until my knuckles bled, yelling, crying, begging. Finally, a dim light clicked on inside. An old man opened the door, face half lit, eyes watery and afraid. "You get turned around?" he asked, voice dry as paper. I nodded. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. He let me in, gave me water, sat me down. "Lot of folks come through here," he said. "Some leave, some don't." I didn't ask what he meant. I called for a tow in the morning. They found the car exact spot I'd left it, still missing the tire. They chalked it up to theft, but I knew better. No prints, no drag marks. Number. Reason. Just gone. I never found the missing time. 4 hours, maybe 5, wiped clean. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the knock. Always the same rhythm. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, dot, and once just last week I found something strange on my porch. A single lug nut, placed neatly at the edge of the mat as if waiting to be used again. They left San Antonio a little past 6 in the evening, heading southeast on Highway 87 toward Victoria, Texas. The mother, Karen, had insisted they drive early and beat the incoming storm. But the delay at her sister's house, more hugs, more talk, more leftovers packed into cheap Tupperware meant they didn't hit the road until twilight, and by then the weather had started to shift. The air felt tight and heavy, like it hadn't exhaled in hours. And by the time they were halfway between Cuero and Victoria, a thick gray fog had settled over the road like a damp wool blanket pulled tight across the windshield. Mark was behind the wheel, trying to keep the SUV steady on the narrow 2-lane highway. His knuckles had gone white on the steering wheel. The kids Toby and Ellie were quiet in the back, earbuds in, eyes glued to screens. Karen occasionally glanced into the back seat, making sure they hadn't nodded off or killed each other. It was that kind of tired, tense silence families settle into after too many days of travel, too many hours of driving, too many miles of rural Texas bleeding into each other. "You see anything?" Mark asked quietly, more to himself than to Karen. She peered out the passenger side window. The fog was so thick it felt like they were underwater. The beams from the headlights bounced off the dense air, creating an endless white wall ahead of them. Tree shapes blurred in and out of existence on either side of the road, bent and skeletal. There were no other cars, no streetlights. Just the occasional barbed wire fence or rusted mailbox swallowed in the mist. "I don't like this," Karen muttered. "Feels wrong. Like we're not supposed to be out here." Mark didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. 15 minutes later, Ellie let out a small, confused sound from the back seat. Not a scream, not even a yell. Just a curious little huh. Karen turned. "What is it, sweetheart?" Ellie leaned forward slightly. "I thought I saw someone." "What do you mean?" "In the back window," she said, voice low and hesitant. "It looked like a face, just for a second. It was gone when I blinked." Mark looked at Karen and she shrugged. "Probably just a reflection," Karen said quickly, too quickly. Toby pulled his earbuds out. What's going on? Nothing, Karen snapped. Your sister saw something weird in the fog, that's all. It looked like a kid, Ellie added, softer now. Not old, maybe my age, just pale. Mark adjusted his grip on the wheel and kept driving. The silence that followed was thicker than the fog. It pressed him another mile past. Then Karen turned, slowly, almost afraid to look. And there, in the rear window, just above the hatch of the SUV, she saw it too. A face, pale, expressionless, eyes wide open and unmoving, staring directly at her. She blinked, and it was gone. She gasped and whipped around in her seat, nearly unbuckling herself. Nothing. Just fog outside the glass and the reflection of the interior dome light. Mark, I saw it, she whispered. It was there, a face. Like it was riding on the back bumper looking in. He didn't answer. His mouth was a hard line now, eyes darting nervously between the road and the rearview mirror. We're pulling over, he said. Karen grabbed his arm. No, don't. I have to, he said. We hit something, or there's someone back there, I don't know. But I'm not going to keep driving like this. He slowed the car and pulled off onto the narrow dirt shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires. The fog made it impossible to see more than 10 feet in any direction. The red glow of the taillights barely penetrated it. Mark got out, closing the door behind him with a dull thud. Karen craned her neck, trying to keep eyes on him through the back window, but the moment he stepped behind the SUV, he vanished into the gray soup. Mark? She called. No answer. A heartbeat later, he reappeared, knocking on her window. She jumped, then rolled it down. There's nothing, he said. No one. It's just fog. Let's go. He climbed back in, shut the door, and the SUV rolled forward once more. But now the silence was worse. The air inside the car felt wrong, thick and cold, as though something had come in when Mark opened the door. Ellie was hugging herself now, curled into the far corner of the back seat. Toby had his knees drawn up. Let's just get to Victoria, Karen whispered. 15 more miles. They didn't see another car. Then Ellie whimpered again. There's more. Karen turned in time to see them dash faces. Not just 1.3 pressed against the rear window like hungry things at a buffet. Not screaming or angry, just watching, eyes dark and vacant. Skin smooth and too pale, almost gray. Hair flat and wet-looking. One looked like a boy, another like an old woman. The third had no mouth. Then they blinked out like blown candles. Karen nearly screamed. Mark, we have to stop. We have to call someone. No, he said firmly. We don't stop again. We just keep going. They're not real. They're just tricks of the light. Fog and stress. We're all tired. But no one in the car believed that. 10 minutes later, the fog grew even thicker. The GPS on Karen's phone stopped responding. The signal died completely. Think we missed a turn, she said. We should have hit that gas station by now. There hasn't been a turn, Mark said. It's just been straight, but that wasn't right. They'd passed that same twisted old fence post 3 times now. Karen knew it. She remembered the barbed wire clinging to it like old veins, and that mailbox bent with faded paint. Redford, it had said, but they had passed it again. And again. We're not moving forward, Karen whispered. We're just going in circles. The children started crying. That's when the banging started. From the roof, something heavy thudded on the top of the SUV. Then another bang. Then dragging like hands or maybe nails. Something was crawling across the top, slow and steady. Karen clutched her door handle, unsure what to do. Mark slammed on the brakes, and everything inside the car jolted forward. Stay inside. He barked. No, Karen shrieked. Don't go out. But he already was gone again into the gray. Curran stared at the back window. More faces. 6 now. And closer. No longer outside. Inside the car. Toby screamed. Curran whipped around, and the faces were gone. The fog outside had seeped in somehow. The interior was filling with it, crawling along the floorboards, rising past their ankles. She threw open her door. Cold, wet air rushed in like a flood. She grabbed the kids by the arms, yanking them from the back seat. "Run!" she shouted. Run toward the trees, but there were no trees now. Just endless fog. Every direction looked the same, white, dull, soundless. No sign of Mark. No road. Just whiteness. The SUV behind them flickered like a candle flame and vanished. Toby was hyperventilating. Ellie sobbed into Curran's hip. Then, footsteps, crunching. Gravel. Mark? Curran spun, clutching both kids. But it wasn't him. A boy emerged first, maybe 8 years old. Gray skin, blank eyes. No shoes. He walked toward them silently. Then the woman. Then the one with no mouth. Others followed. 10. 20. They formed a circle. Curran pulled her children close. She opened her mouth to scream. Nothing came out. Then, darkness. And silence. Asterisk. The SUV was found 3 days later, parked neatly on the side of Highway 87, halfway between Cuero and Victoria. Engine off. Keys still in the ignition. No signs of struggle. Inside, the only thing out of place was the condensation on the window's cold fog, thick and clinging like breath from 1,000 mouths pressed close. There were no fingerprints. No tracks. And no trace of the Reed family was ever found. Locals still talk about that stretch of Highway 87, especially in the fall, when the fog rolls in early and hangs low over the pavement. Some say you can still see faces in your rear view mirror as you pass that lonely stretch of road. If you don't stop, not even for a second. I was about 2 hours outside San Antonio, the sky bleeding into its last gray veins of daylight, when I saw the old neon sign flicker to life on the side of the highway. Motel in blocky red letters, humming quietly against the settling dusk. I'd been driving since Lubbock that morning, fighting a heat haze and the hypnotic rhythm of asphalt, with a back seat full of stale snacks and lukewarm water bottles. The kind of road trip that makes your eyes ache and your thoughts go soft at the edges. Junction wasn't far now, maybe another 20 miles. But when I saw that motel, the Crosswind Inn, I felt a strange comfort wash over me, like I'd been waiting for it without knowing. It sat just past a curve, tucked behind a patch of mesquite trees, its parking lot cracked and faded but clean, with a few older model cars lined up near the office. The building was long and low, painted a washed-out cream color with green trim, and looked like the kind of place truckers might favor. Cheap, no nonsense, forgettable. I pulled in. The air outside was warm and still, thick with the smell of dirt and dry grass. No bugs chirping, no wind, just a flat, cottony silence. Inside, the lobby was surprisingly neat. Wood-paneled walls, a low counter with a bell, and a rack of tourist brochures yellowing in their plastic sleeves. A woman emerged from a back room before I could ring the bell, maybe mid-50s, thin as a rail with a soft smile and a voice like syrup. Her name was Carol, and she asked if I needed a room with one bed or two. I said one and handed over my card. She didn't scan it, just wrote down the numbers in a ledger, the kind you don't see anymore. When I commented on it, she chuckled and said, "We keep things simple here, hon." Room 6, key, not a card. A real key on a fob shaped, like a wagon wheel. The hallway was dim and cool, lit by yellow bulbs that buzzed faintly. My room was clean, cleaner than I expected. Beige walls, threadbare but fresh-smelling carpet, a queen bed with a faded quilt, and a little kitchenette that looked untouched since the Reagan years. The window overlooked a dry field and the faraway shadow of low hills. I remember thinking it was the quietest place I'd ever stayed. I fell asleep to the hum of the wall AC and the occasional creak of someone walking overhead. In the morning, I found my way to the little breakfast nook, near the front desk. Carol was there again, flipping pancakes on a hot plate. There were 3 other guests, 2 older men talking about fishing, and a young woman staring into her phone like she was lost inside it. The coffee was strong and bitter, and the pancakes had that warm, doughy comfort that made me linger longer than I should have. Carol chatted with me about where I was headed, said Junction was just up the bend, and warned me about deer crossing the highway early in the morning. When I finally packed up, she handed me a banana for the road and said, "You drive safe now, all right? Don't miss your turn." The weird part didn't hit until later that afternoon, after I'd gotten to Junction, checked in at the business meeting I was there for, and realized I'd left my phone charger at the crosswind. No big deal, it wasn't even a good one. But when I mentioned the motel to a guy I met at lunch, a local named Travis, he gave me this strange look and said he'd never heard of it. I pulled up Google Maps, but couldn't find anything by that name along the highway I'd come down. There were a couple of chain places near the interstate, but no Crosswind Inn. Where exactly did you say it was? Travis asked. Maybe 20 miles outside town? Just past a bend, near some trees. You'd miss it if you weren't looking. He shook his head slowly. Ain't nothing out there but a bunch of dead pasture land and an old burned-out diner. We joked about it. Maybe it was a pop-up motel, a mirage, or a secret government hospitality experiment. But that night, lying in my hotel room bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Carol, about the coffee, about the threadbare quilt and the banana in my Q folder. I even still had the key, room 6, in my pocket. That wagon wheel fob cold and solid in my hand. So the next day, I drove back. I knew the spot. I remembered the curve in the road, the patch of mesquite, even the rusted billboard just before the bend that had once advertised a long-defunct barbecue joint. I slowed as I came around it, eyes scanning the right-hand side of the road, heart doing this weird little skip. Nothing. Just an overgrown field. Dry grass up to my knees if I'd stepped out. A line of sagging barbed wire fence. No pavement. No parking lot. No motel. Just open land, flat and sunbaked, with buzzards circling lazily overhead. I pulled off the road and got out anyway. Walked across the gravel shoulder into the field. The grass crunched under my boots. I kept looking around like it might suddenly materialize, a building in camouflage, maybe tucked behind a tree. But there was nothing. I even climbed a little rise near the back of the lot, and from there I could see for miles in all directions. No Crosswind Inn. That's when I saw the concrete slab. Maybe 15 feet across, mostly hidden under dirt and weeds, the edges crumbling like it had been poured decades ago. I scraped away some grass and found a few rusted bolts sticking out of the surface, the kind used to anchor heavy machinery. Or walls. It was an old foundation. A long abandoned one. Back at the car, I turned the key over in my hands again. It hadn't changed. Still heavy, still cool. On a hunch, I called the number I'd found online for motels in the Junction area. Not one of them had ever heard of a Crosswind Inn. I asked a woman at the front desk of my current hotel, and she told me that land had been empty since the 80s. Used to be something there. I think, she said, squinting, but it burned down, or went bankrupt, or both, way before my time. I should have let it go. I should have thrown the key away and chalked it up to a stress-induced hallucination or dream. But you know how the mind works when something doesn't fit. Like a loose tooth you can't stop poking. I started digging. Spent hours in the library, old newspapers on microfiche. Junction Sentinel, 1984, motel fire kills 3. Crosswind Inn, electrical fault. The picture was grainy, but I could make out the same cream-colored building, the green trim. The article said the place had been shut down for safety violations a month before the fire. The victims were a married couple passing through, and a woman named Carol Haskins. That name hit me like a cold slap. The same smile, the pancakes. Her hand touching mine as she gave me the key. I didn't tell anyone after that. What could I say? That I'd spent a night in a place that hadn't existed for 40 years? That a dead woman had made me breakfast? Weeks passed, then months. I kept the key in my desk drawer, wrapped in a napkin from the motel. I swear I still had. It still could smell the faint trace of coffee and maple syrup. Sometimes I'd take it out and just stare at it, turning it over and over like it might unlock something else if I held it long enough. Then, a year later, I passed through Junction again. I hadn't planned to stop, but the highway felt familiar. The way a scar feels when the weather changes. I didn't even mean to slow down, but I did. Right at that same bend, with the mesquites and the burned-out billboard. And I swear to you, the motel was back. Same parking lot, same faded sign, humming red against the dusk. Same lineup of cars. And standing behind the front desk, through the window, I saw her, Carol, smiling like she'd been expecting me. I didn't pull in. I kept driving, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, not daring to look in the rear view. I didn't want to know if it stayed or flickered out like a dying dream. I've never gone back. But I still have the key. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear the faint sound of a bell ringing, like someone checking in. They say Texas is too big for ghosts, too dry, too sunbaked. Ghosts are supposed to belong in old East Coast towns with creaking floorboards, cemeteries swallowed by fog, and orphanages turned into condos. But then there's East Texas, specifically the stretch of Highway 21 that cuts past Nacogdoches, where the trees grow thick like they're trying to hide something, and the air tastes like secrets held in pine bark and old tar. It was there, near the junction where FM 225 snakes off toward Cushing, that people began to talk about the girl with the yellow backpack. She first showed up in the spring of 2013, a drifter maybe, or some runaway from Lufkin or farther east. A girl, maybe 16 or 17, barefoot, with pale legs streaked with dried blood or dirt. It was hard to tell. Her hair, shoulder length and dark, always hung over her eyes like wet moss. She never flagged anyone down. She never turned her head to look at the cars. She just walked westbound down the shoulder, one slow step after another, as if heading somewhere she wasn't in any particular hurry to reach. The first confirmed sighting was by a trucker, Ed Mason, who'd been hauling scrap metal to Houston. He saw her near Douglas around 3 a.m., just as he crested a little hill known to locals as Devil's Dip. He slowed down not because of her, not really, but because something about the road just felt wrong that night. It was too quiet, the trees too still. His headlights caught her in the beam like a deer, but she didn't flinch. She kept walking, arms swinging slightly, the yellow backpack looking almost too bright against the gray world around her. Ed pulled over, rolled down his window. "You all right?" he called. She didn't respond. Just walked past, feet slapping softly against the gravel. He got out. That was his first mistake. "I can call someone for you," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You hurt? You need water?" She kept walking. Ed jogged a little to catch up, but before he could reach her, she vanished. 1 second there, the next nothing. The air grew thick, like he'd walked into a greenhouse. The cicadas stopped buzzing. His flashlight wouldn't turn on, even though he'd just changed the batteries the day before. and then just as quick. As it had all shifted, the night returned to normal. His truck lights blinked once, like an eye reopening after a long blink. He never saw her again, but he told the story at every truck stop between Nacogdoches and Laredo. Said she had the eyes of something that wasn't ever human. After that, the sighting spread. A college kid driving back to SFA after visiting his parents in Dallas saw her just past the Atoyac River Bridge. Claimed she was humming some old song he couldn't place, something warbly and slow, like a scratched-up record playing from the woods. He pulled over, thought maybe she'd been at a party and wandered off drunk. He called out. She turned her head just enough that he could see part of her face, a long, angry gouge running from her cheekbone to her mouth. Her lips were moving, but he couldn't hear words. Just static, like radio fuzz. He turned and ran. When he looked back, she was gone. The next morning, he found his tires slashed and strange symbols scratched into the dirt behind his car. He dropped out of school. 2 weeks later, by 2015, she was something of a local legend. Old-timers muttered about her at the bar on North Street, and the county sheriff had an unofficial folder labeled YB File in his desk. Campfire stories grew, most of them garbage theories about witchcraft, satanic rituals in the woods. A missing girl from the 1980s who was murdered by a hitchhiker. Most of it didn't hold up under even casual digging. No record of a girl matching her description in any missing persons report. No yellow backpacks in the evidence locker. Just stories, but there were too many sightings to dismiss entirely. Always near dusk or in the dead of night. Always walking west. Always barefoot. And then, in 2019, something changed. People stopped just seeing her. They started hearing things. A family heading home from a church potluck claimed they heard a knock on the back window of their minivan as they passed through Lilbert. The mom turned around and saw the girl clinging to the rear windshield like a spider, her fingers smeared with what looked like charcoal or ash. She was mouthing something, her face slack, eyes empty. The family screamed, swerved, crashed into a ditch. By the time they got out, the girl was gone. But the marks were still there, black smudges, like tiny palms pressed into the glass. A jogger near Alazan Bayou claimed to hear whispering in the reeds. A voice saying, "I can't find my shoes," over and over. When he looked around, she was standing knee-deep in the water, the backpack half submerged, her head tilted so far sideways it seemed broken. He ran until he collapsed from dehydration. A highway patrolman caught her on dashcam just outside Sackhill. The footage only lasted 8 seconds before cutting to black, but in that time you could clearly see her walking down the shoulder, then stopping, turning directly toward the camera, and smiling wide, too wide, like the skin of her cheeks had been carved open at the edges. The tape was pulled from circulation. The officer quit the force within the month. Nobody knows where she came from. But people who've seen her say the same thing. She isn't lost. She isn't looking for help. She's heading somewhere purposefully, stubbornly westbound, as if she's following a path no one else can see. Then came the drifter, a guy named Calvin McCroy. He was hitching rides from Florida to California, and somewhere near Nacogdoches, he saw the girl standing by an abandoned gas station just off the highway. She looked solid, real, so he approached. She looked up at him for the first time. "You're not supposed to stop," she said. Her voice was dry, like crumbling paper. He asked if she needed help. She looked past him, toward the horizon, and said, "I almost made it last time." He reached out, maybe to touch her shoulder or pull her into the truck, and then, he says, blacked out. Woke up in the middle of the woods 3 miles off the road, his shoes gone, his hands blistered and raw like he'd been dragging himself across the forest floor. The girl was nowhere in sight, but the yellow backpack sat beside him, empty. Inside was a note scrawled in pencil. She keeps walking because if she ever stops, it catches up. After that, Calvin refused to talk about her, changed his name, moved to Montana. It's 2025 now, and sightings still happen. Not as often. Maybe she's getting closer to wherever she's going. Or maybe fewer people are willing to pull over anymore. Locals say she's an echo of something awful that happened in the woods decades ago. Some say she was part of a group of girls from a halfway house that got lost during a field trip and only one came out, never the same again. Some say she's a warning, a harbinger that when she reaches whatever west she's heading toward, something worse will follow. That she's keeping something at bay just by walking. There's a piece of Highway 21, not far from the Loco Pine Farm, where the road dips and the shoulder crumbles into the forest. No lights. No cameras. Just pavement and trees and an occasional buzzard overhead. If you pass through there after midnight, you might see her. She'd be barefoot, carrying a yellow backpack. And if you slow down, if you're one of those who still believes in helping strangers, you'll notice something no one ever catches. Right away. She's not walking on the ground. Not quite. She floats, maybe an inch or two above the asphalt. Just enough that her shadow doesn't match the shape of her body. And if you listen close, really close, you'll hear it too, the sound of a second set of footsteps, just behind hers, always a beat off. Always following.